Hi everyone and welcome to Deep Geek Live. Today we are talking about the Fellowship of the Ring, the first part of the Lord of the Rings as a whole, and I am delighted to welcome my very special guests, the Mellon Heads. Guys, do you want to say hi? Do you want to introduce yourselves and all of the good things?
Yeah, sure. Well, thanks very much for the invitation onto your show, first of all. I'm Dave, and over here we have Johnny, and collectively we are known as the Mellon Heads. We're host of the world's #1 podcast, in our opinion. Just kidding. It's called the Council of Elrond, and it's a podcast which looks at anything and everything to do with Middle-earth. And Tolkien, of course, relate through the eyes of just us two guys who aren't exactly scholars, but we're hugely fanatical and enthusiastic about Tolkien. You can find anything on there from reviews of adaptations, of course, the Rings of Power stuff that's happening at the moment, character deep dives, and of course, lore heavy episodes, which is what we all know and love. We've learned a lot doing it over the last year, I think, or just over a year. And our year and a half, yeah. Our knowledge for Middle-earth has grown exponentially, and so has our love as well. So we've just kicked off our season 2. we've just kicked off our season 2 as well. So if anyone wants to check us out, you can go on Twitter, which is probably our biggest. It's definitely our biggest social media. It's @Mellon_heads, and that's 2 L's in case anyone doesn't know. Or else you can check us out on YouTube, the Mellon Heads. We've just started there too. We also have Facebook and TikTok and all those other social medias. I'm sure you can find them at some point. But yeah.
Yeah, so we've just started season 2, and we're primarily a podcast, but we're trying to get into the YouTube world. We're trying to see what that it seems like a lot of fun over here on YouTube. So we're trying to start that, but we don't really know what we're doing, so we're early days. So go check us out there as well. We'd love a follow.
Well, you are very welcome here on YouTube. It is laugh a minute over here, I can assure you. I have put a link down there in the description to the YouTube channel, but please do. And I know you're primarily a podcast, but please do go and check them out as well. And just so everyone knows, they're being far too humble. They may claim not to be scholars, but they know a lot about Tolkien, so do not worry about this at all. Let me kick off though. Pardon me, as we always do, just by a little high level, what's been going on this week. 3 things very quickly I want to be talking about. The first, Westworld season 4 is still going on. Episode 3 happened, and I'm still loving it. I'm afraid, not covering it this time around, but it is very good. The slower, more cerebral reboot is very much underway. So if you felt after season 3 you kind of lost track of what was going on, maybe start again with season 4. I think it's excellent. The second thing I want to talk about is A Song of Ice and Fire. George R. R. Martin has given not 1 but 2 massive updates on the Winds of Winter. Now, the first one was not a blog post, his blog, and the second one was a podcast with Game of Owns that I think caught a lot of people by surprise. I'm sure they were planning this for quite some time. This was a properly long interview, over 2 hours with him. And he reveals quite a lot about not just his writing style, what we can expect, but I think there's a change of tone in terms of him now starting to look at the end of writing The Winds of Winter. 10.5 years later, he's starting to think about, well, how long is this going to be? For those, spoiler alert, he thinks maybe 300 pages longer than A Dance with Dragons, which was pretty long. So he's close, not very, very close, but closer. I will be doing a video on that, hopefully on Monday, if you want my sort of summary of all of the things that he was saying there. But as I say, this is probably the biggest update he's given for 4 or 5 years, which I think bodes quite well for where he is. But guys, are you a Song of Ice and Fire fans? Game of Thrones? What's your sort of take on this? We've got House of the Dragon coming up as well. Are you looking forward to that?
We're both big fans of the original Game of Thrones TV series. I've never read any of the books. Dave, have you read any of them?
No, but I have downloaded a few on Audible because I keep getting those credits every month, and I'm like, what am I going to do? I can't just get another version of Lord of the Rings or the Silmarillion. So I am planning on checking those out as soon as I don't know what I'm waiting for actually, but yeah, I have them downloaded. But it's scary. It's a lot of books, isn't it? Song of Ice and Fire.
They're just technically only 5 books, but yeah, they are quite big books.
Yeah, they seem very daunting. But I absolutely loved the TV show Game of Thrones so much, and I used to love watching videos about what you don't know, or the differences between the show and the movies. The show and the books, and I always intended on reading the books eventually at some stage. So maybe that year is this year or next.
Well, I would highly recommend it. But the third thing, I should say, that's happened this week happened just a few hours ago. The Rings of Power have released their, and I don't even know now, it's their official teaser trailer. By my count, this is at least the 5th teaser trailer that they've released. I don't know what's the difference between teaser trailer and a normal trailer now. This was at least 2 minutes long, this trailer. I liked it. If you want my breakdown, I did release a very quick and dirty breakdown video of that a few hours ago. But guys, similarly, we've got the Rings of Power coming up. Have you seen the trailer? Are you excited? Are you concerned about the lore? What's your thoughts on this?
Dave?
Yeah, we're. Well, I think I can speak for both of us saying that we're very excited. We have private conversations about it every other day. We're actually going to be releasing our own breakdown of the trailer tomorrow on our YouTube channel, so that's where anyone can hear our thoughts on it. But a little synopsis. Yes, I think we were both very pleasantly surprised at how good this trailer was. I don't think there was any new worries in it. We already know of the Harfoots and the Meteor Man and all this kind of stuff from previous marketing. So I'm just glad to see that there wasn't anything new that I kind of felt a bit irked about. And I just loved everything about the canon stuff. I loved the dialogue, or getting to see dialogue between Elrond and Galadriel, and the music was good. We got some motifs from Howard Shore's Rivendell theme, and lots of cool bits of nuggets in there. So yeah, big happy Dave here.
yeah. And as you were saying earlier, I think it's 2.5 minutes long. So I agree completely. When I heard it was going to be a teaser, Dave and I were expecting like another 1 minute or something like that. So I was definitely delighted. And I think it gave us pretty much everything that we've been waiting for this whole time. Like all the marketing up to now, it's kind of they've been really pushing the new characters, these Amazon characters, I suppose. And all of us fans have been waiting for, a deeper dive into, we're just getting some, screen time with Gil-galad, with Elrond, people like that who we know and who we're familiar with. So that satisfied us completely. We were full of we were stuffed to our stomachs of all the goodness that we got from that. And as Dave said as well, which I think is good, is that it didn't put up any more kind of red flags, which we've had before. And so the kind of only red flags that we kind of, again, are they really red flags? Those kind of things with the Harfoots and the Meteor Man, we're not really sure how that's going to go. And, maybe timeline compressions, things like that. There wasn't any new stuff like that really kind of made us feel uncomfortable. I think pretty much everything was the same or better. So they're going in the right direction, I would say.
Yeah, I think I would agree with you. I think there were a few amazing sights. Khazad-dûm at its height, astonishing. That was exactly what I wanted to see. This isn't Moria when it's dark and dank and basically just this tomb. It was bright. It was airy. There was plants. There was water. This was beautiful, and there was also that sight. Early on, when you and this is for the real Tolkien Silmarillion nerds, the camera panned up and you get the 2 trees. It was so beautiful. It was the 2 trees of Valinor. This is the heart of Tolkien's world. So there were some moments there that completely took my breath away. There was, I have to admit, one small. I wouldn't call it a red flag. It was an amber flag for me. The idea that Elrond perhaps was the stupid guy who was convincing Galadriel that all was well and she can go back home now. It's all okay. That didn't quite work for me, but we'll see. With all of this, I'm a story guy. I'm a character guy. The teasers don't really convey so much. That they can look beautiful, but what I need to know is that the ebb and the flow of the story, that's the thing which will work for me. And just like taking one thing out of context doesn't necessarily always work, but promising, I think, is where I would put that trailer. I think that's probably as close as they've got to nailing it. And Numenor, that's the other thing I should say. Numenor we saw.
Wow.
Which was great. Okay, let's get into what we're supposed to be talking about today, which is, and by all means, by the way, throw some questions about all the stuff we've been talking about so far. But what we're supposed to be talking about today is the Fellowship of the Ring. Now, this obviously is the first, we think of it as the first part of the Lord of the Rings. I should probably clarify first up before we get into the questions. Tolkien didn't. He wrote the Lord of the Rings and gave it to them in 6 parts. It was broken down into, and he gave it to the publishers, and they said, "Well, this is a little bit long." And post-war, the price of paper was actually quite high. Really practical stuff going on at the time, and they thought, you know what, it's going to cost too much. So can you break it down into 3? And he's like, I'm not sure if I can, but they persuaded him, and then they kind of rushed him into making up titles for each of these 3 parts. So the Fellowship of the Ring wasn't the title of the book that he wrote first. This was a title that he came up with a lot later on down the process, when they forced him to come up with the title of the first third of the story. But I mean, I don't know whether, actually, before we do questions, do either of you, well, I'll throw it at you, Dave, what's your first, when I say the Fellowship of the Rings, how do you kind of, what's your initial reaction? Is this your favorite part of the book? You're not your favorite? What's your feel about this bit of the book?
Well, first of all, when you say the words Fellowship of the Ring, the first thing that hits me is my experience of watching it as a movie when I was a kid, because that was my first introduction to Tolkien. And out of the 3 films, it would be my favorite film. And I think that would also be the case for the books. Maybe, I don't know, maybe The Return of the King. But the Fellowship of the Ring, I definitely think it's the book I've read the most out of the Lord of the Rings, because when I was younger and I wanted to watch it, I found it incredibly boring when I was a child, trying to get through those chapters of Frodo and Sam and the hobbits getting through the fields and describing every tree, rock and leaf that they pass on the way. But now I think it's just a beautiful non-epic story of an adventure of friends going through the woods and fields, and then eventually forming basically a team of superheroes to go out and experience the rest of the books. So that's how I would sum it up if you were asking me.
Well, I am asking you, and it's probably only fair to go on and pass it over to Johnny. What do you think?
Yeah, actually, I'm wearing my Fellowship T-shirt as well.
Excellent.
Which I just
nice.
I accidentally, well, I just said I'd put on a Lord of the Rings T-shirt, and I didn't
just
realize
threw this on.
Yeah, I just threw this on earlier, guys.
Should have put mine on.
And as Dave said, or as we were saying before, maybe before we came live, Dave and I, we got to know the Lord of the Rings through the movies first, and then that's what led us into the Tolkien world. So same as Dave, I think I was maybe 11 years old or 12 years old when the first movie came out in the cinemas, and I remember I went to see it 3 times in the cinemas. And again, it is the book that I've read the most, and I have a tattered copy here beside me that's all highlighted and ripped and notes scribbled on it. So it's definitely the book I've read the most as well, I would say. Pretty much. And but like Dave said as well, when I hear the word Fellowship of the Ring, it kind of brings me back to that kind of childish mystery and that adventure. And I don't know, it's that's definitely a feeling of kind of nostalgia that I get when I hear somebody mentioning the Fellowship. And I would say it's my favorite movie as well. It's the book that I've read the most, but I don't know if it is my favorite book. I really like the Two Towers book as well, and I like them all. So I don't know.
They're all pretty good.
Yeah. So I don't know. I don't remember what was the question.
Well, you don't have to pick your favorite child. This is okay. We can
Right.
we can go with the fact that this is the one you've watched or read the most. I mean, I'm clearly many decades older than you guys, but I also remember that moment of going to see the first film, and I brought a huge gang of my friends with me. I don't know, about 20 people or so, and
Class.
I can remember that moment of nervousness because I'd seen the trailers. Obviously, I'd read the stuff in the magazines, I'd seen the pictures, and I thought, this looks good. This looks like it's going to be okay. And I got in there, and you get like, it starts out with the Galadriel, fantastic Kate Blanchett's kind of voiceover giving the history of everything, and I was still nervous. I thought, yes, okay, this is. And then they cut to the Shire, and the music came in, and we saw the Shire, and I can remember I just leaned back, and it was just, yes, they've got the feel of this.
They nailed it.
It was such a moment. I can still remember how that felt to just be yes. And that's incidentally, that's what I've always said. This is my bar for the Rings of Power. I know when I first watch it, I'm going to be leaning forward, going, make it right. But what my bar is, I want to lean back and go, yes, this is Middle Earth. But let's as we're sort of talking about the Fellowship of the Ring, I think Johnny, when you're sort of talking about the sort of the it's almost kind of like a childlike start with the sort of the in the Shire and things like that. There is a very odd moment, and let's start with slightly odd. There is a very odd moment in the books. It's not in the films. There's a very odd moment in the books. Callum Barnes asks us about this, saying, "Hey, Robert, could you give your opinion on the thinking fox?" Myself, I always like this as a narrative nod to the style of The Hobbit. Now, for those who are wondering what the thinking fox is, and I will throw this over to you guys in just one moment, but I'll give the context here. Early-ish on in the Fellowship of the Ring, we have Sam and Frodo, and Pippin's with them as well at the time. Their first day out from Bag End, heading east out towards Rivendell. All is well, all is quiet. Sam finds a place for them to camp for the night. Everything is fine. And then we read this. They set no watch. Even Frodo feared no danger yet, for they were still in the heart of the Shire. A few creatures came and looked at them when the fire had died away. A fox, passing through the wood on business of his own, stopped several minutes and sniffed. Hobbits, he thought, well, what next? I have heard of strange doings in this land, but I have seldom heard of a hobbit sleeping out of doors under a tree. 3 of them. There's something mighty queer behind this. He was quite right, but he never found out any more about it. And then we just cut straight back to, and then they woke up and carried on with their quest. This is, I have to say, one of the most left field changes of perspective anywhere in literature. We have just Tolkien just showing us the hobbits from the perspective of a fox. Why? I mean, I don't know, Johnny. Let's get to you first. Well, why? What's going on here?
First of all, it's amazing. I think it's a fantastic perspective to show. And again, I mean, I've never really thought that this was quite strange. I never really took it as that unusual because, again, I think most people know that the Lord of the Rings, the Fellowship started out as The Hobbit Part 2. As like a sequel to the Hobbit books that he had written already, which were very episodical and kind of they travel along and they meet the bear man, and then they meet the big trolls, and then they meet whatever. And so it's kind of it's very childish, and it's from stories that he would tell to his children at night. So I don't think from that perspective it would be unusual for him, imagining him speaking to his children and telling them a story at night about giving them like the perspective of this fox is able to think. And I don't think there's anything more to it really than that. I mean, maybe people have really, really deep theories about what this could mean, but that's all it's ever been to me. I don't know if anybody, would you like to share your thoughts on it, Dave?
Yeah, this is just Tolkien having a bit of fun on the page, and I also think that it didn't strike me as much as I think it does a lot of people when they're like, oh my god, this massive change of perspective. But I don't know. I just think it's kind of normal in the book itself. We have this enigma of Tom Bombadil, and he's just a complete wacky character. So like when we're hearing the thoughts and goings on in a fox's head, I just kind of take it as normal. And well, maybe the fox is actually a highly intelligent creature and should be considered in the same vein of form as the eagles and other creatures like that. But
the foxes of Manwë.
Exactly. Maybe the foxes have been sent by Manwë. But yeah, I don't know. I enjoy it though for what it is.
I do too, and it is quite weird. I mean, Tolkien does have quite a jumping POV. For those who, if you read George R. R. Martin, he's very clear. This chapter is from this person's POV. This chapter is from this person's POV. Tolkien does move around quite a lot, even like paragraph to paragraph sometimes. So the fact that it shifts isn't the issue. The fact it shifts into that of a fox is the fun thing. I agree. This is very much just he's having fun in the early parts of this. It is, as you say, this is written, or the commission at least was for a follow-up a follow-up to The Hobbit, and The Hobbit was very clearly a children's book, so this is very much in line with that. Before we get out from the Shire, we're still in a safe place, we're still in a place of, you know, Bilbo doing fun speeches and people eating too much and fireworks going off. This is where we're at. It's after this that the danger starts getting closer and closer. But you mentioned Tom Bombadil, and I asked this of all my guests. This is as good a time as any. I normally do at the end. But this is the same question I asked to everyone, because everyone has a different answer. Dave, I'll go to you first. Who or what is Tom Bombadil?
Oh, who or what is Tom Bombadil? He's like what I said earlier. He's an enigma. He's an enigma. Nobody knows. He's just there. I think we've all seen the theories. But actually, I think one of the funniest theories is that he breaks the fourth wall, and this is like Tolkien reincarnated into the book that he's writing himself. I don't believe any of the theories. I just think that he's a random character that only cares for himself, and he's satisfied in everything that he has around him. He doesn't feel the effects of the ring because he doesn't care for power, and he's just happy with his wife and his life, and and that's another reason why he doesn't want to leave his humble abode or do anything else or help out the world in any other way. He's just satisfied in himself. So but as far as like what tier of being does he fall into, I don't know. I don't want to box myself into a category. I'm going to have to think long and hard about that.
Well, I mean, this is the beauty of the question. Literally everyone has come up with a different answer. So, Johnny, go on. Over to you.
Oh, the pressure's on. I don't know, I guess. We all know that he's an enigma. I've heard so many different things that some of them I think are great. I like the idea. I like the idea that maybe it's like Eru Ilúvatar on summer holidays. And I think of all the theories, I think he can't just be another, like, he can't be a Vala, I don't think, because he's got, well, maybe he could, but I mean, I think his powers are so unique, and also the fact of maybe not caring about, it's not getting involved. I don't think it's not caring, it's maybe just that Ilúvatar doesn't want to get involved with the dealings of what's going on in the world. He wants, to stay apart from that. So I mean, that's a theory that might work as well, which I think is quite good. But I mean, there's so many good answers. I don't know.
Who do you think he is?
That's the big question,
Robert.
I mean, he is an enigma, as everyone always says. But I mean, I'm loving the idea myself that he is an echo of the music of the Ainur, the creation of Middle Earth. Everything he does is about song. His magic is about song. He seems to be able to control everything. He is just about the existence. He's about being. He's not about doing stuff. He is an expression of Middle Earth, and everyone says that he was the first. He will be the last. So he is connected, rooted to the world. He is rooted to Middle Earth. So he's an expression of that. That's where I'm at. I think quite a few people have come up with some version of this is Tolkien putting himself into the story, or he's just having a bit of fun. I love it because it shows he's clearly this. I'm not going to use the enig word again, but he's clearly this very anachronistic character in the story. But he has a purpose, and Tolkien says that he has a reason for being there. He just can't quite express it himself, which I think is wonderful. The author himself can't even tell us exactly why he's there. He just knows that he needs to be there.
Yeah.
One other thing that I would add, was just that I read, I think I read an article about that before, about Tom Bombadil, saying that basically, because again, going back to the fact that Tolkien started out, as you said, he was commissioned to write a second Hobbit. And I think the early days, that was kind of where he was going. I think the first parts of the Fellowship are a little bit similar to the Hobbit. And then as he goes on, I think as he was writing the book and the story was kind of naturally unfolding, he realized there was more political themes and like war themes. And he was like, this is actually, and then maybe he went back, and we know it wasn't like his first draft that he released. It was, he went back and rewrote those parts loads of times. So I think Tom Bombadil was a character that, again, his children would have been familiar with from previous writings and from just bedtime stories and things. And I think I heard somebody with some theory that was maybe Tom Bombadil is kind of like Stan Lee, kind of just Stan Lee in Marvel movies. He's just like having a little cameo in this part of the book. And so people that read the book who are familiar with Tom Bombadil from other works would have been like, oh, I know this guy from that other from whatever, or his children would recognize the character as well. So again, just something that I heard that I thought was interesting, that maybe it was just this whole little cameo appearance in the book. But again, everybody has their own great theories. So
they do. One other, before we leave Tom Bombadil, we never leave Tom Bombadil. He's
always with us.
One other thing that I always find useful is the way at the very end of the story, when the hobbits are going back to the Shire and Gandalf's going with them almost to the edges of the Shire, and then says, you know what, I'm going to go and see Bombadil. And he heads off, and what he says is, I've never been able to talk with him before because we've had nothing to talk about. And I always found that a fascinating line, that they've had nothing to talk about. And that's where this kind of being and doing thing comes from. Gandalf, all his time when he was in Middle-earth, he had a mission. There was a thing he had to do. Suddenly, by the end of the story, he'd done it. Sauron had been vanquished. His mission was complete. He had nothing left to do but get on that boat and get back out of there. And that was the first time in all of his time there that he actually could just hang out with Tom Bombadil, and it's just like him enjoying Middle Earth, him just appreciating what there was there. I find that quite a telling moment, and we don't.
What a conversation they had!
Oh, exactly. I mean, we know that Gandalf he loved a pint and he loved a smoke, so I'm sure they would have had a riot of a time.
Do you remember how long it was? Because I think he said that they were in conversation for like months.
2 days. Oh,
it was months. I mean, I don't think they gave I don't think they said exactly how long it was, but it was vague between him leaving them and then him reappearing much later there with Celeborn and all the rest of the gang. Not Celeborn, actually. He hung around, but Círdan. That was a proper long chunk of time. Maybe he spent all that time there, maybe he didn't. We actually don't know. But let's go to a couple of questions from the chat. Cloaked One, thank you very much, saying nothing better to cap off 12 days straight of work. Wow, that's a lot of work than an IDG stream. Also realized I missed sending you birthday wishes for last week, so very happy belated birthday to you. Thank you so much. I hugely appreciate that. And while I'm thinking of it, Cloaked One is one of my excellent moderators. If you are watching this live, if you are in the chat, please do go and give the moderators a bit of love because they do an amazing job. Robert Cosina, thank you very much indeed, saying hello, fellow Robert. Hello. And Mellons, love your work. Great theme of a stream, my favorite one. Could you please tell me what was happening during the years when Frodo had hidden the ring in the Shire? So this was off the top of my head from about, I think it was 3001 was when of the Third Age, when Bilbo had his party and the ring passed to Frodo. Frodo kept it secret, kept it safe. Gandalf, during that period, started growing suspicious. I mean, he had been suspicious for a while, but that was the period where he headed off and he tried to find the history of what was going on here. He knew it was some kind of a ring of power. He suspected it might be the One Ring, but he had to go and hunt. And that's when the period of the hunt for Gollum happened. Him and Aragorn heading off, trying to find Gollum. Gollum getting captured by Sauron, tortured. The Baggins Shire thing all happened. Him getting released back again and getting captured. That all happened. And then Gandalf going and looking in Minas Tirith. That all happened during that period. So what we're looking at for that 16, 17-year period is a build up to the events of the Lord of the Rings. That's also, I think, again off the top of my head, roughly, it might have been a year or so earlier when Saruman was ensnared. And I use that word because I'm literally writing a video on it at the moment, and it's a fascinating word that Tolkien uses only a few times. Ensnared by Sauron through the Palantir. From then on, he is sort of controlled, and my video that I'm writing is about what does that actually mean. What sort of control did Sauron have over Saruman? Because it clearly wasn't complete, but who knows. So that and Saruman growing his army, that was what was going on during that period. Guys, is there anything important you think that I've missed in that kind of build up between Frodo getting the ring and the sort of the events of the Lord of the Rings as a whole?
Well, I thought you were going to start telling us what Frodo was up to in the Shire, because I was like, "Ooh, this is a good question. I don't know the answer for this one."
Sitting there counting his spoons in Bag End.
Exactly. Like, what was Frodo and the rest of his?
What was Bill the Pony doing? Is the real question.
The pony was just
about
getting
Bill the Pony
born
later.
We do. Oh god.
All right. Nice. Yeah.
I want to hear more about this word ensnares, though. That sounds you've really piqued my interest there. But I'm sure I'll find out
my interest.
Well, all right.
Did I use it right?
No, you did.
Yes.
So I think, and I always spoil my videos. So thank you for doing it. I didn't have to spoil my own. You're spoiling it for me. Yes. So ensnared is a word Tolkien doesn't use much. So it's noticeable when he does use it. He uses it for ensnaring Celebrimbor and the other guys around him to make them make the Rings of Power. He also uses it when he distributes the Rings of Power to the nine humans who become the Ring Wraiths. And Morgoth also ensnares a few other people as well. So it's always with kind of nefarious intention. But it doesn't always mean absolute control. It's the feeling of it's a snare, the way that you might catch a rabbit in the good old days. You would like put a snare out for a rabbit and that would capture it. That doesn't mean you've got complete control over everything to do with that rabbit, but it does mean it can't get away. That's the kind of feel that we've got going on here. And that is what's going on with Saruman, and at the risk of spoiling the entire video, the idea is that doesn't mean that Saruman is in complete control of Sauron, but it does mean that there is a link there through the Palantir that means that Sauron has sort of got him on a leash, as it were. So that's the feel we've got going on there.
Very good. I'm sorry for asking you to spoil your video, but that was good.
No, you're very well. As I say, I always do. It's not like
it's a growing trend.
I do it to myself. I don't need other people to do it.
I love this comment that says he ensnares a brace of conies, lol. From Sword of the Morning.
He snares a brace of conies. Well, there we go. Reflective Rambling saying the good old days. Clearly, I'm decades and decades older, so I am very old. Do not worry, Reflective Rambling. It's my youthful good looks, tongue in cheek. I am at least 80 years old. Mara Lee,
I believe.
Thank you very much for you did a super chat before we went on air saying just a show of love and support for fantastic merch, stories, and content. Thank you, Robert. Murray, you know how much I appreciate your support. And you had a question saying some of the characters we read about in the Fellowship of the Ring were not in the film. For example, Farmer Maggot. I think we saw just like the top of his scythe or something in the film. Why do you think Tolkien included Farmer Maggot in the story? And could you go over the important parts he played in helping the hobbits along their way? Now, Farmer Maggot is one of my favorite characters, I have to say, as a kind of like a minor character, but I love him to bits. I don't know whether either of you have got strong feelings about Farmer Maggot, but do one of you want to sort of jump in? What's your take? He wasn't in the. I felt he was hard done by not being in films and just turned into a random scythe chasing away people who are stealing his stuff. What's your take on Farmer Maggot?
I always feel like I want to eat some mushrooms after I read the chapter on Farmer Maggot. Is he not? I don't know. I'm thinking out loud now. I think maybe he's credited as the guy who the Nazgul speaks to and says Shire Baggins, and he says they're all up in Hobbiton that way. So I think that guy gets credited as Farmer Maggot in the movie. I'm not too sure, but that's.
Do you know what? I think you are right, because when I was a kid, I used to collect the models for Lord of the Rings. What are the figurines called? I can't really remember. The Games Workshop figurines that you paint and whatever.
Oh, yeah.
I'm pretty sure I had a Farmer Maggot one as well, and it was just him holding up his scythe, and you had the hounds as well beside him, and he was modeled off that character from Peter Jackson's movie. So good shout, Johnny. I think you could be right there, but does that really?
It's got nothing to do with the question, really. Like, I mean, that's just, I think he. But I do think that, like, at least maybe Peter Jackson put in a character. Maybe he wasn't, nobody said, "Hey, Mr. Maggot" or something. Like, they didn't name him in the movie. But I think there was that kind of like, tip of the cap to that character being an important character in the movie, or sorry, in the books. So, but in terms of the book, I always, again, as I said before, Dave and I, we saw the movies before we read the books. So I kind of, you kind of come out of the movies fearing Farmer Maggot. You're like, oh, this is the guy that chases you with a scythe and tries to kill you for stealing a few vegetables. But then you read the books and you realize that he was a gentleman, Farmer Maggot. He was a lovely man, and he really, really helped them. And he also basically told off a Nazgul, which is, not many people can say that. And he didn't catch the Black Breath, I suppose. So that's also, well, I don't know if he did. I don't think we hear about.
He didn't actually. I mean, one of the reasons why I love Farmer Maggot is he's one of a couple of characters. The other, Barleyman Butterbur, who, there's the guy.
Oh yeah.
I put him
a
up
great
there.
pint.
Exactly, another one of my heroes. Those two guys have the distinction of, and Tolkien uses the exact same phrase for both of them. When the Nazgul come calling, both of them say to the Nazgul, "Be off," which is always strikes me as this wonderfully brave thing to do, because neither of them are particularly strong or powerful, and here's like a ridiculously scary figure coming up at them, and they both just say, "Be off." And the other thing about Farmer Maggot, which is you were talking about Tom Bombadil being from these childhood stories from Tolkien. Farmer Maggot is one of those characters that Tom Bombadil name checks and says he's a good guy. He actually, Farmer Maggot, or Tom Bombadil, often it would appear, just goes upstream and spends some time with Farmer Maggot, just sitting around the kitchen table and drinking a couple of pints and shooting the breeze and having a fun time. Similarly, Barleyman Butterbur, he says that he's, I can't remember the exact phrase, but he says he's a really good barman. He's a good guy. And when you get Tom Bombadil recommending you, I think that says a huge amount about the character of the person. So I think Farmer Maggot he was hard done by Peter Jackson. The feel, I understand, the feel is exactly right in that the hobbits were scared of him, at least Frodo and Sam were scared of him, but then they realized actually that was just like a childhood thing. He actually looked after them, fed them, he took them to the Bucklebury Ferry. There's nothing desperately heroic about it, but other than the be off moment, which was earlier, but he was a good person doing the right thing, and probably without them, then they wouldn't have got there in time, and the Black Riders would have caught them. So,
and I like how Frodo he starts to treat them nicely, and Frodo thinks that maybe he's forgotten about him stealing the mushrooms when he was younger, and then later on he mentions it. He says, "Yeah, you didn't think I'd forgotten about that, did you?" And so that was a kind of a cool thing as well, that he was treating them so well, and he was feeding them and being so, giving them so much help, even though the last thing that he really remembered about Frodo Baggins was that he had been kind of a thief. And so I think that was nice little, showing his character, I suppose, to say, even though you've robbed from me, I'm going to take you into my home and feed you and take you down to the ferry.
Yeah, and he gives them a picnic basket effectively, and then they open it up, and what's in there? Obviously mushrooms,
full of mushrooms.
When it was just a nice little, almost a last touch of the Shire before they sort of went off, and there was dark and disturbing things in the future.
A good representative of the Shire.
I think so. So. Let's go to a question from George R.R. Tolkien. Salutations, Robert. I was wondering when you were going to sing that Tom Bombadil for us, when we hit 400,000 subscribers, and not a moment before. And I highly, you guys probably are not aware of this. This is just a little treat I do for my my moderators. They when we hit milestones, because my moderators are the finest humans in existence, they often ask for a little treat, and I'm very, very happy to provide them with that. So when we hit 400,000 subscribers, I think we're 380, maybe 381, or something like that. So it's not too far away. Then
come on, people, tell your friends. Get subscribed.
I will be singing the Tom Bombadil song live on air, and I highly recommend everybody fast forward through that bit. But some people wish that. But anyway, that's when that's happening. George R.R. Tolkien. My question is a Lord of the Rings question from the First Age. I've been wondering for a long time as to why most elves resurrect, but Feanor hasn't. Will he? And why wait so long? Also, actually, you had another thing here saying, also, did you get to see Daemon's armor from the exclusive pictures released yesterday? This is a House of the Dragon issue. Yeah, I did, and Daemon Targaryen...
I think I saw that. Is that the black armor?
Exactly, it's the black armor.
I saw that one. That looked so cool.
It's really cool, and also for those who are deep into the fandom, Mark Simonetti, who is one of the finest artists of A Song of Ice and Fire, did a classic picture of Robert Baratheon and Rhaegar Targaryen back in Robert's Rebellion fighting one another, and Rhaegar Targaryen was wearing black armor, the sort of the dragon wings on the helmet, and red rubies on the breastplate. And if you're a fan of A Song of Ice and Fire, and you'll realise quite how significant that is. What Matt Smith is wearing, red rubies on the breastplate. It's amazing. Really looking forward to that. But that's a little bit of a digression because we're talking about the Fellowship of the Ring. And well, this is digression of Fellowship of the Ring. This is going back to Feanor. What's your take on Feanor? I know you claim not to be scholars on these kinds of things, but Feanor is this great legendary hero, anti-hero, whatever, of the history of the legendarium. And when he died, he didn't just die; he kind of combusted because his spirit, his soul, was of fire. What's your take on all of that,
Johnny?
Thank you for throwing it over to me. I don't know. I mean, as Robert just said, we know that they said that his spirit burned brighter than anyone else on the land. So I don't know. Feanor just always has like he's the best at this, and it's like he wasn't the best warrior, but Tolkien, I remember there's a line that says he would have been the best warrior if he had set his mind to it or something. He was just, I don't know, he was just really there was something special about Feanor. So and yeah, it's very strange. Like when he died, there's no other characters like that I know of that just self-combusted either. Robert, am I right there? Gonna go to you.
No, you're absolutely
Meteor
right.
Man. I think he combusted.
Meteor Man.
He does the opposite.
Does the opposite of that. Meteor Man, as
busts.
far as we're aware, yeah, exactly. He's got, and I think I said it in my breakdown video, that so far all we know about him is he's got an almost awe-inspiring invulnerability to fire. I mean, if he did indeed come in a comet and crash down on the Earth and then emerge from the flames, then he ain't no normal human. That's all I'm saying.
That's Tom
exactly. Yeah, there's something going on there. Just a very quick shout out in the chat because I randomly saw the Red Book is here. Stephen, hi. Good to see you.
Stephen.
The Red Book, for those who don't know, one of the finest, and I do not say that lightly, one of the finest YouTube channels talking about Tolkien, focused very much in on the books and the lore. So I dare not mention Meteor Man in his presence, but Feanor, he says Feanor, the elf, the myth, the legend, absolutely. So I mean, in terms of and I'm sure one of the moderators will put wherever your chat is, we'll put a link to Stephen's channel there for you. Feanor, he does get this. This is the second prophecy of Mandos. He does get this hint of sort of making good, because for those who don't know I won't go into all of the history of Feanor, but basically he is this great smith, this great creator. He makes the Silmarils, which is where the Silmarillion comes from, because all of the stories around there in some way in the First Age connected in with these 3 jewels that he made that capture the last light of the trees of Valinor. But he swore a vow when they got stolen that no one would ever have them apart from him and his sons, and he made his sons swear the vow, and this is all hugely heretical stuff that he does, and he goes off and plows this burning furrow across Middle-earth, and the chaos of the First Age ensues from him. He is the heart of so much of this story, and the central bit of all of this is the fact that he's asked to give up the Silmarils because the 2 trees of Valinor, which is where all the light and the goodness came from, they get snuffed out. This is Morgoth and Goliant. Bad things happen, and the Silmarils have the last light from them. If only the Valar could use the Silmarils, perhaps they could bring the light back. Perhaps they could bring the trees back. And he says, no, they're mine. Nobody can have them. But the second prophecy of Mandos, the future, Ragnarok and beyond, effectively, we get Dagor Dagarath as Tolkien has it. He does he gets the Silmarils, because the Silmarils are never destroyed; they're just distributed, one into the sky, one into the earth, one into the sea. They come back, and he gets the chance to hand them back over, and he does that, and then the trees are recreated, and all is good. So this is a wonderful moment of hope, really, because this is just prophecy. This is just what might happen, what the elves sing of maybe what the future will be like. But it's this idea that even the person whose actions led to such terror and horror, he still gets a chance at redemption. So, somebody in chat went past very quickly, said Fëanor did nothing wrong.
Yeah.
Fëanor did lots wrong. But
that's like
a
famous hashtag at this point. Like
it is a famous hashtag at this point.
I was going to ask you, Robert, if you picked up on in the trailer for the Rings of Power that came out today. Did you pick up on any moment of that which possibly could have been the Sons of Fëanor taking an oath?
Yes, there was. I didn't actually put it in my trailer breakdown, and this is. I mean, I rushed out my trailer breakdown, to be fair, so I didn't pick up on every last detail there. But yet there was a moment when you saw. It seemed to sort of pan round in a circle, and then these
lifting the
swords,
swords,
lifting the swords and sort of putting them in. That looked to me like the Sons of Fëanor swearing the oath. Fëanor made them swear the oath. The oath basically being Silmarils, we get them or no one else gets them, and we're just going to keep on going. And it's that we're going to keep on going that caused all of the problems, because even when kind of nice people had them, they'd sworn that they were going to go and get them from them, and there were lots of bad things that followed. So yeah, there was a hint of that. The trailer had quite a few flashbacks to things in the First Age or the Years of the Trees that looked pretty amazing. I wonder whether we're going to be treated to something similar to what we had in the beginning of the Fellowship of the Rings, which is a sort of a context-setting flashback kind of thing.
Yeah.
I don't know. We need something there for the Rings of Power, because some of the themes of the Second Age require us to understand what happened earlier. Why can't humans go to the Undying Lands? That's an important fact that we need to understand. That what is this idea that there might be some bad guys on the loose? Why are they in hiding? What's going on? We need to understand a hint of what happened earlier. They did it so well at the beginning of the Fellowship of the Ring, the film, in, I don't even know how short it was. 5 minutes max, surely. But they're just giving that backstory of what happened with the One Ring, allowed the casual viewers to understand what it was and the importance of what was going on. So I think we're going to get that. And I think the entry point for a lot of this will be Galadriel again, which makes sense because she was there all the way through it in a way that pretty much I think no other Second Age characters were. So I think I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I definitely think that they're going to do a similar thing, a voiceover prologue showing little clips. Like they've already put a few of those clips in the trailer, so they certainly have a lot more in stores that they're just waiting to show for the first 10 minutes maybe of the first episode. That's my hope.
Something like that. I mean, maybe it won't be the first few minutes. Maybe we'll see a bit of action, and then Galadriel just sort of like her eyes glaze over.
And here's what happened earlier.
Exactly. I don't know. I don't know how they'll do it, but I think we'll get something. There was so.
You're wondering how we got here.
Exactly. I mean, there were so many. The two trees obviously is there. They will have to reference that in some way. There was. We've already seen what looks like Finrod, who died in the First Age. And we've got what, on second look, I think is probably the kinslaying at Alcalande, possibly a little bit extra of the War of Roth. I don't know. There's a lot of things there that perhaps they will show. Well, they will show us, but it's a matter of when and where. Mara Lee, thank you so much for the super sticker saying fan. Thank you very much. And also thanking the great mods. Cloaked One picking up for Syned King I love it when people do this, picking up questions for other people. The chat goes through so quickly. I often don't pick up on things, and when somebody turns them into a super chat, I obviously do. So thank you very much. That's very kind. Where do hobbits and orcs go after death? I thought orcs are twisted elves and should go to the halls of Mandos, while hobbits are related to men and should leave the world. Great question. I did have a related question. I won't be able to find it now, from one of my patrons. Actually, I'll wrap it up with this one. This is from Ben, saying, if orcs are corrupted elves, if this is this corruption their physical form or spiritual as well? If an orc is killed, would they find themselves in the hall of Mandos? And if so, are they required to contemplate themselves? Is it possible they could revert back to being an elf? So this is one of those kind of deep lore questions that I'll kick off, guys, and if you want to chime in, you're more than welcome.
Well, it's actually funny that we just did an episode this week on the orcs, and
I think we avoided that question.
Yeah, we touched on it, but we talked about how we were going to avoid this question because we're going to leave this up for the likes of the Tolkien professor.
Greater minds.
Greater minds. This is way above our pay grade, but I did hear the Tolkien professor Corey Olsen talking about this at one point, and but yeah, I'd love to hear your opinion on this matter.
Well, I'm now trying to resist the urge to say, well, as you're talking about this, and as expert, the background here is that we have the issue of what are orcs fundamentally. We'll come on to hobbits, halflings in a little bit. And this is not as easy a question as you might think. I did do a video on the difference between orcs and Uruk-hai ages ago. If you want to go check that out, where I touched on this there. What we have in the Silmarillion, so this is the published account, is this. Those of the Quendi, that's the elves, who came into the hands of Melkor, Autumno was broken, were put there in prison, and by slow arts of cruelty were corrupted and enslaved. And thus did Melkor breed the hideous race of the orcs in envy and mockery of the elves. So what we seem to have here as the sort of the Silmarillion version of things is that Melkor Morgoth, if he captured an elf, and this seems to be a thing he likes doing, capturing elves, then he would sort of take them down into prison, then use all of his dark magics and sort of misty stuff and corrupt them and turn them into elves. So that's the official Silmarillion story. After that, it appears that they, and I can't remember the exact phrase, but it was something like they reproduced as humans and the other children of Iluvatar did, which seems to imply, and they had babies, and then they had babies, and then they had babies. So that was the sort of the official version. But Tolkien didn't, he changed his mind a lot on a lot of stuff. And one of the things that he kind of changed his mind on was this. This is Christopher Tolkien's take on this, while rooting through all of the various bits of paper that his father left behind. But J.R.R. Tolkien wasn't 100% sure. He didn't quite like the idea that orcs were just corrupted elves, and he pondered for a while, maybe could they be Maiar? He wasn't so sure about that. Maybe they could be humans. Certainly Uruk-hai seemed to have had interbreeding with humans mixed in there as well. And it all ends a little bit vague. And I think we have to accept this. Certainly the orcs are a mockery of elves. That much we know. Whether that was done by, first of all, corrupting an elf and turning them into an orc-like thing, quite possibly. But there may well have been interbreeding. I mean, Morgoth was like, he didn't really have many qualms about this kind of stuff. So maybe there was some interbreeding with some things we don't want to think about, that sort of led to orcs in the end. But they're sort of the opposite. A mockery, in as much as elves love the light. They're literally drawn to the light. When they saw the light of the two trees, they were drawn towards it. They follow the star. That's elves. Orcs, the opposite. They shrink away from the light. They need the darkness. So that's the situation. It is left vague. And when I say vague, there are lots of different versions, is the honest answer. And I think that we often, as Tolkien fans, we often fall into the trap of trying to pretend that everything Tolkien did was very clear and this was a perfect fantasy creation. Yeah, it was a perfect fantasy creation, but it was ever evolving. Even the languages he was tweaking up onto his deathbed. He didn't, this wasn't a final version that he had. He changed things as he went along. So this is complicated. But in terms of what happens to them afterwards, if they were an elf that got corrupted, personally, yeah, I think maybe they would go where elves go, just because they, against their will, they got twisted and corrupted into a different form. I don't see why their spirit should be left out of it. That wasn't their fault, so I see no reason why not. But later versions of orcs after generations aren't that they're not elves. Let's not pretend that they are elves. They are many versions down, many generations later. Halflings, though, and this is, I will throw to you guys actually on halflings in terms of your take on Harfoots in just one moment, in terms of the Second Age. But halflings, Tolkien, he didn't talk about halflings in the Second Age, hobbits in the Second Age, but he did sort of hint that they probably came from humans originally, and so they're on that side of affairs. So where their spirit goes, and Tolkien's very he talks a lot about the spirit of different types of people, and this is at the heart of the sort of the Second Age issue about elves and humans, is that elves, their spirits are tied in. That's why they're immortal. But humans, it's a mystery where the spirit goes, and that's him talking about us, really, because this is humanity and the world in a different stage of imagination. It is a mystery what happens to the spirit. So hobbits, halflings, no. But what's your take in terms of Harfoots in the Second Age?
Well, whether or not that they come from humans or not, isn't that I'm just thinking of that cartoon film at the very end when I can't remember the Return of the King cartoon film that came out in like the 70s, where Bilbo and Frodo are talking to each other, and Elrond is there, and he says, you know, Sam is younger than you and he is taller, and Merry and Pippin are younger again and they're taller, and their children are going to be taller and taller, and eventually they're going to end up being as tall as humans. And it kind of, doesn't he say something like, and then
he looks into the camera, doesn't he? And he's like,
and then the age of hobbits
be like
will be
you
over.
or something.
Yeah, they'll be just like you. And I feel like there was kind of like an insinuation that hobbits are eventually going to become more like men, or they're becoming more like men as they get older through generation. And I think Harfoots are supposed to be even smaller than hobbits again. Am I correct in saying that? Maybe, I don't know. But I just feel like the more generations that we see, the more hobbits are like evolving into just men again. So I feel like they would have the same destiny and the same fate as any man. What was the question?
And I think the Rankin Bass cartoons, that's the best place to go when you're looking for deep lore. When you want to really know what the correct origin story is. That's where you need to go.
No, but I think like even I know you're saying that with a pinch of salt, but like I think most of the lines in those movies are taken directly from the book. So if I read a line from the books, I always like hear it in either Peter Jackson, take, or else like a Rankin Bass version. I don't know. That's just me. That's just how I visualize things.
I've definitely pondered more the question on orcs and their souls and where they come from, rather than the idea of. I haven't really thought. I don't know. I just don't find it as interesting. I suppose. I think that the orc question is quite is the more interesting of the two, in my opinion. So I've definitely put more thought into that one. So I don't really think I have any good answer for the where the halflings come from or the Harfoots. But what you said about all the changes that Tolkien makes. Also, there was an interesting one that, I think, shortly before his death, he decided that the spelling of orc should be O-R-K instead of O-R-C. So, which I think is funny that just after so many years of writing so many times O-R-C, he's just like, you know what? The correct spelling should be O-R-K. And so it's just kind of contradicting all of what he'd written before. But he wasn't afraid of changing his mind and saying something that might, cause a bit of a dilemma for people that are asking these kind of difficult questions. But in terms of asking these kind of difficult questions, something else that Dave and I were saying the other day when we did our episode on the orcs was, it's really amazing that you've got a fandom who looks into such deep questions like what happens to the souls of these evil creatures. It's kind of like, as I'm saying, evil creatures like these under like inverted commas of like they are just, you're introduced to orcs as just, these are just the things that we kill, and they're almost like droids in Star Wars, where you just wipe them out and don't worry about them, they don't have feelings or anything, so it's kind of, we have a fan base that are looking into these deeper questions, and the funny thing is that as a fan, very often, because Tolkien's writing was so expansive and so in-depth in nearly every single area, you don't feel like there's no written answer or there's no answer out there. You feel like I have to just find the answer. And maybe if there's no answer that you can, like if people say, who was Tom Bombadil? And we can't agree on an answer, it's almost like the true answer was lost. And it's almost like the Dark Ages or something. It's not that it was never given. We just assume that everything is so developed in this world that there must be a real answer out there, but we just need to keep digging to find that answer. So I think that's something that's really incredible about the world that Tolkien created. It's unique, I think, in that way almost.
Absolutely. And as you were talking about Tom Bombadil, because we cannot escape Tom Bombadil, I did have he has ensnared us. Not Tom Bombadil, because that implies evil intent,
but not nefariously.
No, so Creative Branches says we've got to talk about Tom Bombadil. We can't stop talking about Tom Bombadil. Creative Branches. Can you name 3 characters? I've named. I can think of 2 possibly in modern pop culture that I'd most like Tom Bombadil. I think this was one of the ones that I sent through to you earlier. So I'm hoping that you've got some fantastic ideas here. What would you? I came up with a couple, but in fact, I'll go first actually. So I think in terms of Tom Bombadil, I think the classic sort of Green Man idea, which is not pop culture so much as something that pops up in a huge amount of different things. This embodiment of nature, Green Hand in the Song of Ice and Fire history, this kind of figure is definitely there. And I also, if there are any other Star Wars fans out there, Bendu or the Bendu, I'm never quite sure who it is. This character who I saw in Star Wars Rebels a few years ago, who's wonderfully narrated by Tom Baker, the Fourth Doctor, who you cannot escape his voice. It's a wonderful voice, but he's this kind of embodiment of the Force, and he's never truly explained. He's not one side of the Force or the other side. He's neither Jedi nor Sith. He is just an expression of it. That, for me, the way that it was put across was very much an echo of Tom Bombadil. But guys, perhaps you've got some better examples. I feel sure you have.
Johnny, do you want to go first, or will I?
No, you better take
right.
it.
You blew me away with that answer, because an embodiment of the Force, I kind of wish I thought of something like that. My first answer was just like, who is a strange fellow that doesn't make any sense to anyone in the world? He's an enigma of a guy. And also I was thinking about Tom's musical ability and singing, and I was just, first thing that came to me was Michael Jackson, just a complete random weird. Oh, I think he's an enigma, and like if you were to just fast forward 1,000 years into the future and look back in history, everyone would be like, "What the heck was this Michael Jackson? Like, what was he a kid? Was he an adult? Like, what did he do? Like, why did he have Neverland? Like, what's going on there?" I just feel like he is an enigma of a character of pop culture, and so he was my first choice. But I did come up with two others, but Michael Jackson was my favorite one. The other one was, like I said earlier, Tom Bombadil is just like satisfied with who he is, and like he just doesn't need to do anything else. And I think it just kind of reminded me of Robert Downey Jr., where he just kind of he's just the man. Like he doesn't need to do anything else. He doesn't need to help people out. You come to him for answers. He doesn't come to you. So there was that kind of thing. The last person I chose was Keanu Reeves, just purely because Tom Bombadil doesn't age at all. So and Keanu Reeves is the same embodiment of Keanu Reeves that he was in the 90s. So there we go.
Very good. Well done. I hope people aren't waiting for an answer from me because
I mean, I was merely looking. I don't know whether anyone else I'm looking at Johnny and thinking, well, if he grew his hair a bit, maybe he could be Keanu Reeves.
I thought you were going to say I could be Tom Bombadil.
Certainly a resemblance going on there, but I don't know. Did you have another answer on this one?
I only saw the questions just before we came live, so I didn't really put any time into thinking about these. But I think, there's always a similarity between Tom Bombadil and maybe Treebeard. I think that this kind of in touch with nature, just being. I think is there a part? I'm sorry I haven't prepared this, but I think there's somewhere that it says something about Treebeard being the oldest creature on Middle Earth, even though we should know that Tom Bombadil is older than Treebeard. We should all imagine that is the correct answer. But I think there's a mention of him being the oldest thing. So they have that kind of in common of just being really, really old. And Tom Bombadil is the master. I mean, Treebeard is basically the master of his world as well. He goes around controlling the trees. And speaking of trees, maybe he's like Groot as well, who's just got all these special abilities, and that we don't really. Groot's a bit of an enigma as well. So I don't know.
Yeah. Never ending.
Yeah,
I was thinking of Richard Attenborough popped into my head there when you just said how he's the oldest thing ever, and I was like, Richard Attenborough is probably the oldest thing ever, and he's also in touch with nature. And David Attenborough. I'm sorry,
his brother.
Yeah, his brother.
Yeah. Well, yes. I mean, him and the Queen are the oldest beings known to humanity, as far as I'm aware. I think that's true. And in terms of Treebeard, yes, there is a line saying he is the oldest. I think this is probably one of those in-character things where we're expected to think actually he isn't. That's just that person not knowing. But I did think when. I think it was Gandalf who talked about Tom Bombadil saying that he wouldn't, if you told him about the outside world, he wouldn't care about any of it unless possibly it was news about Treebeard, and which I always found quite a fascinating thing. The idea that that's really the only thing he cares about, what Treebeard's up to, when they do kind of share an ethos.
And also in the movies, what is a really cool touch that I liked was where Peter Jackson gave some of Tom Bombadil's lines to Treebeard, and where Treebeard is the one who saves them from the tree that ensnares them. I'm going to use that word again. So the tree that grabs a hold of Merry and Pippin, and then instead of Tom Bombadil coming along and saving them from Old Man Willow, it is Treebeard who saves them, and he uses a couple of the lines that Tom Bombadil says. So that was a nice kind of. I know people are angry that Tom Bombadil didn't get an appearance in the movie, and I think maybe from a film standpoint, it might have been very difficult to just throw this character in. And so I understand the artistic reason of leaving him out, but I think it was nice for us to us fans of Tom Bombadil to get a little sort of a glimpse, like, oh look, that's a line that Tom Bombadil says. So it's nice to see that play out in a Lord of the Rings movie. So that was something nice.
Yeah, I mean, I was actually okay with him not being in the films. I think for somebody coming into this from afresh, it does disrupt the feel a little bit to be ever increasing danger and black riders chasing you and then the forest attacking you and then saying hey do diddly do. I mean, it does kind of bring you out of it.
Yeah.
A little preview, yeah. It does kind of bring you out of it. And this guy with his garish clothes and so I understood the reasons why. Robert Cosina saying, hello again, fellow Robert. Hello again. I would like to turn our sight onto the dwarves. Why not? As we didn't talk about them much. What was happening to them during the Fellowship? Was Erebor the last surviving kingdom? Are either of you dwarf fans here? Do either of you want to pick this one up?
Dave, you want to go for it?
Sorry, I'm just trying to find the question. As we didn't talk much about them, what was happening to them during the Fellowship? What was happening to the dwarves during the Fellowship? I assume, I don't know, but yeah, I don't know. Erebor, they were chilling in Erebor. They certainly weren't chilling in Khazad-dûm, because we know that is now the basically a giant tomb called Moria, and there's no dwarves there to the lack of knowledge of Gimli. But yeah, I assume that the rest of them are in Erebor. Was it the last surviving kingdom? I want to ask.
Definitely the biggest one that was surviving, was it? I know that, so people that don't know about, we know that if you're a fan of the movies, you know that you can go in and they see Balin's tomb, and so basically, then if you've seen the Hobbit movies, you'll know that Balin was one of the dwarves who went back and retook Erebor. So what happened in those years, 50 years or so between, well, maybe more than that, between the end of the Hobbit and the start of the Fellowship, was that a party of dwarves were sent out from Erebor, led by Balin, and they went and they basically fought their way back into Moria, and they retook it, and then they set up base there. I think they survived. They survived a few years there, at least, anyway, and then eventually, what happened was that the orcs retook it again, and then that was the end of that line of dwarves as well. We saw it was another couple of dwarves, Aure, I think, who is the dumb dwarf in the I think he's Dumbo, or what, not Dumbo, what's his name from the Seven Dwarves, like
Dopey.
Stupid or Dopey. I think basically that's where they got their I don't know, their ideas from for the Hobbit movie, it seemed, because he was just
he was the scribe in the books, wasn't
exactly
he?
Yeah, so
he was the one that actually wrote on
in the Fellowship, when we see Gandalf picking up the book and reading the last words, those were written by Aure. So that's a cool, and so you can see this skeleton holding the book as well. So that's obviously, it must be the remains of Aure that he's picked the book up from. So that's but yeah, as Dave said, Erebor that's where the party that went out to retake Moria, they had been sent from Erebor. So that was probably their main base. There's probably Blue Mountains, maybe there was still some dwarves.
But this is all before, this is pre-Fellowship still. So what was happening to them during the Fellowship?
Yeah, so I mean that's pre-Fellowship. So then I'm just agreeing with you that I'm assuming that Erebor was the main stronghold of dwarves before.
They were probably just delving too greedily and too deep in whatever cave that they were in, and just searching for gold.
Yeah, I mean, I think we should probably not give in to this wizardy propaganda about delving too deep. This is what dwarves do. They mine. Come on, I mean, but so there are 7
wizarding
dwarf tribes, and the one that we know the most about is Durin's folk, the Longbeards. That's the lot that we come into contact with. There are 4 off to the east and south that we basically don't hear much about at all. They exist. Occasionally we hear that they send some people over and they get involved in certain conflicts. But basically, that's all we know about them. There were 2 that were in the Blue Mountains that pretty much died out. There are a few left. When you get Thorin, for example, he heads off when he's wandering around. He heads off into the Blue Mountains there for a little while. But Erebor is now, as you say, that's the main base for Durin's folk. The people in the Blue Mountains largely came and, as far as we can tell, became assimilated with Durin's folk. And they're there in Erebor. There's the Iron Hills as well. The slight backstory is immediately before we get the events of the Fellowship of the Ring, Sauron sent an emissary. We don't know who this is. Maybe it was the Mouth of Sauron. Maybe it was Nazgul, that went up to Erebor and basically said, we're hunting for Baggins Shire and all this kind of thing, and tried to tempt them with oh, would you like this pretty ring? All of that kind of business. And that's what prompted Gimli and co. to be heading down to the Council of Elrond, because they thought there's something strange going on here. We don't quite know what's happening, but it's a little bit weird. Let's seek the Council of Elrond. So that's why they're there. And then when we get, it's not in the Fellowship of the Ring. In the Fellowship of the Ring, basically the dwarves just like hang around and do their dwarfy thing. But when we get a few months later, when we get the big battle of the Pelennor Fields, this isn't the only battle going on. There's wars happening across Middle-earth. We just don't really read about them. And one of them is this massive battle that happens at Erebor, and the dwarves and the humans team up, and they win. But they take huge numbers of fatalities. The King Dain, and I forget which king it is of the Lake Town and Dale people at the time it was, but he dies as well. It might have been another bard. They both die. But they do repel the orcs eventually, and then the ring's destroyed, and all is well again. So they play their part. And there's this sort of vague throwaway line where someone like Gandalf says, "Oh yes, we mustn't forget the huge battle that happened up there with lots of casualties. But hey ho, let's head back to the Shire."
We mustn't forget
something along that line. So it's like, oh, so there was other stuff going on. So it doesn't get much of a mention, but the dwarves definitely they played their part.
Legends.
They are legends. Let's go to a non-Tom Bombadil question. Mara Lee saying, when Frodo and the hobbits were pursued by the Black Riders, they met a group of elves led by Gildor, who's chance to Elbereth, ward of a Black Rider. Who is Gildor and who is Elbereth that made these chants so powerful? Well, I mean, I'll pick up on this one, guys. If you want to sort of chime in afterwards, you're more than welcome. So Gildor is an elf. He is a Noldorin elfie. I think he's from the house of Finrod. So this is related to Galadriel's family, basically. And he is a part of a wandering company of elves. There are a few of these around at the time. It would appear that they do wander, and they sort of sleep out under the stars. They had just been to the towers. When you think of west of the Shire, if you can imagine west of the Shire, there's 3 towers there. In one of them, there is a palantir, those great seeing stones. We see a few of them. They play an important part in the story, but one of them is kind of locked in over on the Undying Lands. You can't change it. You can't move around, look at other stuff. It's just locked in. And that is kept there. Círdan keeps it safe for elves who want to just have a look, who just want to see the Undying Lands. And Gildor and his gang thought, it's our turn. Let's go and have a look. So they go there. They look at the Palantir. They look for Elbereth, who is Svarda, who is the queen of the Valar. And this is who is held of the Valar, held in the highest, warmest regard, it's probably fair to say, amongst the elves. And so they're coming back from there. That's why it is that they happen to be wandering around when Frodo and Sam and Pippin are in sort of the outer parts of the Shire, just needing some, they didn't know it at the time, needing some help. And they sing of Elbereth. So they sing of Varda, they sing of the Queen of the Undying Lands. And we read that a Black Rider was nearby, but was sort of pushed away by the power of this song. This happens a few times in The Lord of the Rings. The name Elbereth seems to have an impact. The holiness, the beauty of the Valar seems to have an impact on the Black Riders. It's used, I think Frodo uses it on Weathertop, and it causes them to just like hold back a little bit for a while. They also use it down in Shelob's lair, just saying the name of Elbereth and the kind of the holiness of this works. So that's what's going on there. It's a sort of an intriguing thing, because this is Tolkien just doing something out of the deeper mythos of his legendarium. This isn't something a casual reader would go, oh yeah, Elbereth, of course, I understand why that's important. But this is, I mean, that's why Gildor's there. He was looking in the Palantir, and of course, this isn't the kind of thing that a casual person would pick up on. But that was what was going on. I mean, is there anything do you want to sort of pick up on from that, the sort of the Gildor and Elbereth, or how Elbereth is used?
We had just spoken about this recently on one of our podcasts as well, and we had mentioned those scenes where Frodo shouts out Elbereth Githoniel on Weathertop and in Shelob's lair, and I think isn't it the password that he uses for the file of Galadriel? I can't remember. Is that the same thing? We kind of talked about how it is Tolkien places a serious emphasis on the spoken word, and it is like a holy, like the valor. It's kind of like coming through Frodo without his knowledge. Like, he doesn't mean to say it, he hears himself. I think that's how it's worded in the book. He hears himself say the words Elbereth Githoniel, and it's very religious. Like, I think it's kind of like he's just suddenly speaking in tongues and he doesn't know what's going on around him. And this is like you had just mentioned there, when he's fighting off when he's being attacked by the Nazgul on Weathertop. This is the thing that scares him the most, not just taking out the scary daggers that were made to kill the Witch King, but it was the shouting of Elbereth, and thus they fled away. They ran away bravely.
Yeah, because Aragorn mentions shortly after the Nazgul are shooed away, Aragorn mentions to Frodo that the name of Elbereth was the thing that the Nazgul probably feared the most, even though, and again, for anybody who doesn't know a lot about what happened in the book of the Fellowship of the Ring, Frodo isn't such a wimp in this scene. He does still, cave and put on the ring, but he does take out his dagger.
His sword
doesn't drop it.
Fall.
he kind of falls at the feet of one of the Nazgul, of the Witch King, but he swipes at him with his sword, and he actually maybe makes contact with his cloak. At least maybe he stabs at his foot, and all the while shouting this name Elbereth. And that's the comment that Aragorn says afterwards. He says that saying that name was the thing that did the most damage. So yeah,
and the fire.
And the fire.
Yeah.
I mean, it couldn't hurt when he's dual wielding sticks of flame.
But I think the thing, just as an aside on this one, I think the thing that Tolkien or Gandalf makes reasonably clear is that they withdrew not because they thought, well, what about these scary hobbits? We can't get past them. It was because they thought the job was done. That was why they thought we stabbed the guy. The Witch King stabbed him. The end of this blade had broken off. Just give it a few days. That they thought it was done. All they had to do was hang around quite close, and eventually Frodo would just turn to the dark side, effectively. Yeah, become a wraith.
Yeah.
So that was what was going on there. Diego Godoy saying, "Hola, Robert. Hola." what are your thoughts on the different closing events of the Fellowship book versus movie? Do you think Boromir's death should have been presented at the beginning of the second movie? I'll throw this one to you first, guys. I think that for those who can't remember the exact differences in the films, then we see Boromir's very heroic in the film's death at the end of the Fellowship of the Ring. That's basically the big moment at the end of the Fellowship of the Ring. In the books, then that's sort of like pushed off until the beginning of the next book, in the Two Towers. And the sort of the important moment is Frodo choosing to leave the Fellowship with Sam and head over the river. But what's your take? Do you think was that a good change for to put that in the films like that?
From my perspective, I think again, I'm going to repeat myself, but Dave and we saw the movies first, and then we fell in love with the books afterwards. So I can completely imagine, again, if you are a person who loved the books and then watched the movies, there's probably plenty of little things that maybe irked you a little bit, or that you were like, oh, I don't like that they changed that. But from us, that was what we saw first. And then when we read the books, we were like, oh, okay, so this was a change that was made, but we didn't watch the movies and think, oh, this is a disgrace that they've made this change. So I remember reading the book the first time and realizing, like, wait a minute, there's only a few pages left and they still have to have that amazing scene with Sean Bean. I definitely didn't. I'm not angry about it. And also, when I read the book now, I feel like maybe it's a very kind of strange place to leave it, because they all just get scattered. And I mean, the final chapter is called "The Breaking of the Fellowship," and I mean, it makes sense. They kind of all just. I think there's a part where someone says, I can't remember if it's the narrator or if it's I think it's the narrator. I think Tolkien says that basically there was almost as if a madness came upon them, where Frodo was missing and the hobbits started to chase after them, and I think Aragorn is trying to like say, wait, come back, let's stay together, and it says like there was almost a madness came upon the company, and they all just ran off in different directions. And I think it just ends very like abruptly after that. Of course, they have the little conversation between Frodo and Sam where Frodo decides to go, and Sam's like, "Yes, you can go, but I'm coming with you." But I don't know. I think for the movie, again, it's cool to have a nice big heroic death as like the end of a movie. And for me, over the three movies, that is my favorite scene of any of them. So it's really one that I think is such a powerful scene. So I think that's a fantastic way to end that first movie. Again, I would never have the audacity to say, yeah, Tolkien should have changed that and done the Jackson way or something. But I definitely wouldn't. I'm not angry at that change in any way.
No, yeah, I'd agree. I think the first time I read the book or the books, I found it so jarring that the beginning of the Two Towers starts with Boromir's death. I think what was even weirder was the fact that I think the chapter is called The Departure of Boromir, or is it The Death of Boromir? But whatever it is, it's extremely spoiler territory.
Spoiler,
you're like, imagine back in the 1950s or whenever 1940s or whenever the Two Towers came out. You're like, oh, I'm so excited to read this book, and you open up chapter 1, The Departure of Boromir. You're like, oh, that's so sad. And yeah, there's plenty of changes that Jackson makes for the adaptation that are absolutely necessary. We talked about the leaving out of Tom Bombadil. Yeah, I know. I was like, how do I not say his name? Yeah, but leaving out Tom Bombadil, that's an obvious one. But definitely, I think having Boromir's death at the end is so powerful and so strong, and it's so sad as well. And yeah, I do think it was a necessary change on a movie standpoint.
My hot take is that is a sadder moment than the "you bow to no one" moment. That's just my that's more of a tearjerker in my opinion. But I don't know. That's
which Boromir, yeah.
Well,
for me, I think I don't know.
I know people who would agree with you, but
Okay,
for me, you bow to no one every time. I just
Yeah.
can't. I just turn into a little loving baby at that
Yeah.
point.
I usually cry just because the movie's nearly over at that point, and that's why I'm
you've
so
got at
sad.
least 3 more endings to go.
Well,
By
that's
that
true.
point.
Yeah.
Don't you worry. It's
But I'm no.
yeah. I mean, I think I would agree with you. This is one of those things where I don't hold up the films and the books as like in competition at all.
Yeah.
And I think that it worked really well. I think it works absolutely fine in the books as well. I've got absolutely problem in terms of the sort of we have to remember, as I said right at the top of this stream, is that Tolkien didn't write this as a trilogy. He wrote this as one big book, so it was almost the reader was supposed to just keep on going.
Can I ask, were the books all released at the same time, or was there a waiting period? They weren't.
No, there was a break between the three. Yeah.
Because I think when you finish watching the movie of The Fellowship, you feel relatively satisfied. But I think if you're reading the book, I don't know how I would feel if I had to wait any length of time finishing that chapter and thinking, oh my God, I need to start the next chapter immediately. I think, I think you're almost more on the edge of your seat at the end of that chapter of the book. When you've closed the book on the last page of The Fellowship, I think you're more inclined to say, I need to start the next chapter immediately. Whereas with the film, you kind of get that there's lots of open ends, but you're still relatively satisfied with that, huge emotional ending to that movie. So that's, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's more apparent, I think, actually in the Two Towers, and I mean, maybe I'll spoil another video I'm currently writing in a moment. But the Fellowship of the Ring, you can trace an arc if you want to, and the end of the Fellowship, and that's where Peter Jackson, he wanted the film to have an arc, and the arc ended with the end of the Fellowship. For Tolkien, though, that didn't have an arc; it was just a part of the bigger arc, and so he didn't have the same need that Peter Jackson did to end what he considered part 2 of his 6 parts of his story with a satisfying moment that allowed us to go, now I feel I can live for the next year until the next movie comes out. So I think that they're trying to serve slightly different things. The thing that was potentially going to be spoilery for another one of my videos is the middle bit, which is actually, I'll throw this to you because this is something I will openly admit that I had thought I was the only one secretly deep down in my heart was confused about, but was very embarrassed to admit. The Two Towers, which 2 towers are being referred to in the Two Towers? And I would love to know, and this is not putting, I promise you, and I'll explain why afterwards, but I promise you this is not a putting you on the spot thing, but I would love to know what your gut instinct is on which 2 towers is this.
Yeah. Should we both
go
have
ahead.
a guess?
Well, what? Pick 1 tower each? No, like
do 3, 2, 1, and just say that.
Yeah.
No, you let people know what you think first.
Well, I would think that it's Barad-dûr and Orthanc, in my opinion. And even when you look at Tolkien has an actual artwork, an original Tolkien, and they kind of, to me, those 2 towers on the front of that Tolkien book, or that Tolkien book, that 2 tower version of the book that has his artwork on the front, I always assumed those to be Barad-dûr and Orthanc, but we actually did, I hate to keep saying this, but we did an episode on this, that was probably one of our first episodes ever, actually. And we talked about how Tolkien himself wasn't even really sure. He was like, maybe it's Orthanc, maybe it's, I don't know. I think this came about but this came about when he had to come up with the name of the middle 2 books, and he was like, let's call it the Two Towers. And then he was like sending letters to his publisher, and he was like, I don't really know which 2 towers they are. I think maybe one's Orthanc and the other is Cirith Ungol or Minas Morgul or whatever. But Yeah, again, it's an interesting one, but I would think just because I saw the movies first, and the trailer of the Two Towers shows Orthanc and it shows Barad-dûr, and you hear Saruman saying the union of the two towers, and that's what I assume is what he's referring to.
And as a 12-year-old kid, I had the poster of the Two Towers on my wall in my bedroom of Orthanc and Barad-dûr.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
Just ask a 12-year-old Johnny.
I think that's what most people go with, Orthanc and Barad-dûr, and because it's not just Saruman. In one of the trailers they had Kate Blanchett again, obviously because they love doing Galadriel voiceovers, going something along the lines of, the dark times are coming because there is an alliance between the two towers of Orthanc and Barad-dûr, and that is because Peter Jackson wanted. He needed something. What were the two towers? If you got a film called The Two Towers, he needed clarity. What are the two towers? And if you're watching this, whoever you are not alone if you're slightly confused about which two towers this is. Because I know I was. And Dave, just on a very technical thing, that picture you got, I wish I had. If I were more technical, I would suddenly magically produce that picture in front of us so that we could see it. Yes, it's definitely Isengard, but the other one, the feeling is that this was actually Minas Morgul, not Barad-dûr, because next to it there is a moon, and that is the Minas Ithil, which is what Minas
Tower of the Moon
used to be called, which is Tower of the Moon. And this appears to be what he thought after his first thought was, this is just, take your pick, whichever two towers you want. He then seems to come to this idea of that, but then maybe changed his mind again later. But anyway, that's spoiled another video that's coming out in about 2 weeks' time, everyone. So look forward to that one. What are the two towers? But in the meantime, chat, have some fun. Which of the two towers do you think are the two towers? So it's not as straightforward as you may think, which was a digression from the fact that the second book is the classic example of, to Tolkien, this wasn't the second book. This was just the middle bit of his story, and so it doesn't have the arc. So he had to make up an arc. So Peter Jackson, when making the films, had to make up an arc, and that arc left or pushed some of the Frodo and Sam story off into film 3, specifically the bits in Cirith Ungol, and also the moment when you see Minas Morgul, when the Witch King comes out. And so actually he backed himself into a corner, because a couple of the potential towers that this could be referring to weren't even in the film. So he had to go with some towers that were definitely in the film, and he went with those two. So anyway, complete digression.
So it's kind of almost like a Peter Jackson inception in our minds, why we think of these towers as being Barad-dûr and Orthanc. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly, yeah. I mean, that wasn't what Tolkien came up with a number of different combinations of towers, but I don't think he ever came up with Orthanc and Barad-dûr as being the two towers.
Peter Jackson.
This is, I know, damn you,
wily minx. He ensnared us all.
That's your word of the week, definitely.
I know. We've
learned a new word.
Okay, let's go with what were we talking about this time? Boromir's death. We started at Boromir's death and got to that anyway. Let's go to Maralee asking your favorite non-main character. Let's go there. That's easy territory, isn't it? That's a lot safer ground. Mine, I will start again. That guy, I love him. Look at him, his beautiful mutton chops. He was done dirty in the films, it has to be said. But he's such a good-hearted individual that in the books he's there. He doesn't do the carrying. Remember that scene where he's like cowering away when the Black Riders come? That's not him at all. He was completely different to that. The moment he realized that he'd forgotten, and hey, the guy's got a bad memory. But apart from that, at the moment he realized that he'd forgotten something important, he just did absolutely everything in his power to make sure that the hobbits were sorted, at the risk of his own life and his own business and absolutely everything else. So I'm a huge Barliman Butterbur fan, and you can tell the affection that someone like Gandalf has for him when he's angry with him, but then blesses his beer, so he has fine beer for the next 7 years, which is a wonderful bit of magic, it has to be said. But who wants to start? Johnny, why don't we start with you? What's your non-main favorite character from the Fellowship?
Oh, okay. I was going to ask, is this from the Fellowship or from the Lord of the Rings?
Yeah, let's go with the Fellowship.
Fellowship. You've picked a really good one. I'm similar to you. I have a very soft spot for Barleyman, but if I were to try and think of somebody else, again, off the top of my head, I don't know. Sam's gaffer, maybe. Again, doesn't get as much screen time or page time, I suppose, as Barleyman Butterbur, but he just seems like he's a man about the town, and everybody respects him in Hobbiton, and Sam's always trying to do what's right in terms of like his old gaffer. And I don't know, I don't really have too much to say about this. I haven't really thought about this much before, because minor characters, I like the ones that we've mentioned before of Farmer Maggot as well. Just fantastic characters, but I'm not sure, I can't really think of too many more other minor ones that
They're all major.
They're all major.
They're all major.
In my opinion, they're all major characters.
Have you got any, Dave?
Is it wrong to say the name one more time? Tom Bob?
Yes, it's
no,
wrong.
No, we've moved on. Well, at first I thought we weren't just talking about the Fellowship, and I was gearing up to say Prince Imrahil is definitely one of my favorite characters. But no, I won't. For the sake of it being the Fellowship of the Ring, I'm going to say Odo Proudfoot, just for his lovely proud feet, and his representation in the Lord of the Rings movie is hilarious, especially when he shouts out "proud feet." So there you go.
Excellent. And Trig brackets Ireland says Fredegar Bolger, who Fatty Bolger is a great character. I would highly agree with that. He's he's the fifth Hobbit who very rarely gets a mention, and yet he also, like those other great guys like Barliman, like Farmer Maggot, he faces down a Black Rider. He's the guy who basically stands, for those who don't remember him from the books, when they go to Crick Hollow, all the evidence for the Black Rider says that's where the hobbits have gone, Crick Hollow. And Fredegar Bolger just says, right, well, I'll stand here then while you go and run and like try and escape. I'll just like stand by the door and like tell them to go away. And it's heroism in its own way. He does survive. And at the end of it, he gets thrown into prison through the scouring of the Shire. It's and emerges not fatty anymore. So I mean, I don't know whether that was Tolkien Skinny Bolger. I mean, I don't know if this is Tolkien being fattest. I'm not entirely sure what's going on there, but
I know that it was important for him to stay in Crick Hollow for the plot. But every time I read that, I'm always like, yeah, of course, someone's going to be like, you guys go on ahead. You go and do that thing in Mount Doom. I'll stay here and, mind the fort.
Yeah.
So, you could read it and think maybe it's a bit of a cop-out, but I like to think he was being the hero and, standing guard. So let's go with that.
Excellent. Well, yeah, so I think he's a good little character. Let's, I think one of you, I can't remember, did talk about this a little bit ago, 444, saying, as we know, Tolkien started writing Lord of the Rings as a Hobbit sequel. Do we know or suspect when he realized that this book would be a different kind of story? This did kind of morph, yet he was commissioned to do a sequel to The Hobbit. The Hobbit was a massive success. And then, there was a big war. And the other side of it, then he was sort of asked, can you do another one? And he started writing this thing. But by the end of the process, he was there arguing with his publisher about, you know what, this is really a sequel to the Silmarillion that, you haven't published and no one knows about, but, you should really just publish that and this. What's your take on when did that shift in his mind? How did that shift? Did it shift? Or was he always secretly wanting to write something that was more Silmarillion-y than Hobbit-y?
Well, I think obviously with the Hobbit being definitely a children's book first and foremost, I always just kind of assumed that Tolkien was like trying to break into the world with his little children's book, and then he's like, right, now I can share my absolutely epic adult story with the world. But I just feel like even when we talked at the start of this episode or the start of this live stream about the curious fox wondering about the hobbits, it was almost like he was like a gardener. He was growing into the story. He was starting off as kind of like a childlike story, and then it just became this epic tale and this quest. And Tolkien, I think we mostly know that he started with the languages, and he was a great fan of maps and all that kind of stuff, and he just wanted an epic story where he could flesh out these characters. And I kind of just feel like George R. R. Martin talked about this before, where he said some some writers are like gardeners and others are like architects, and he feels like he's a gardener because he just lets the story flow from his typewriter, and he just lets the whole thing grow. And I feel like Tolkien would have been the exact same.
Like he just sits down and the story just kind of falls out of him onto the page.
Falls out of him, and then he has to go back and he has to like revisit loads of the things that he wants to correct. He wants to change the spelling of orc to O-R-K on his deathbed and upset the world. So these little things. So I do feel like maybe he just kind of started off in a more juvenile, kind of kidsy friendly, I just want to write a story for my children, and then he ends up being obsessed with his own writing. So I don't know, it could be completely wrong.
I think that is seen a little bit in the beginning of the Fellowship book, because I think it starts out, as we said before, we said it earlier already, that it kind of starts out kind of episodic, a little bit like The Hobbit, and then like, I mean, with the whole appearance of Tom Bombadil as well, as kind of randomly what's going on here. I think then later on, I mean, I'm assuming that Tolkien wrote it this way, and then when he got to like later stages, he thought, this could actually, like, maybe he had that thought himself, this could be my sequel to the Silmarillion. And then he realized that this could be his like vehicle for like, creating that story that he always wanted and that he always had in the back of his mind. So I imagine that he kind of went back and, kind of just restarted and tried to like reformulate his story. But then maybe there was some parts from the original one that he'd written that he was like really happy with and he wanted to keep them in. So I don't know. I think it's a difficult question to answer. When exactly in Tolkien's mind did he decide that it was, this was
it was the year 1941.
Yeah.
Let's go with 1941. Prove us wrong, people. I think. Let me just very briefly pause, because I always forget to do this halfway through the stream, and I don't want to forget. Patrons, thank you so much for your support. I cannot do what I do without your support. If you wish to support this channel, there is a link down there. That is the best way to support this channel, is through Patreon. That said, I want to pick up on the gardener comment, because you're right, George R. R. Martin, he says this a lot, and indeed the big update on the Winds of Winter, his blog post, the first half of it was him saying again and again and again, I'm a gardener writer, which sort of morphs into his point. What he seemed to be trying to say was, so I may have changed a few things, that it's taken him 10 years to write. In 10 years, he's had lots of new ideas, basically, is what he was trying to say. So just because you saw that on the TV show does not mean that's how it's going to end in the books. So that was what he's trying. And he, interestingly, says he thinks that Tolkien was an architect writer. He uses him as an example of an architect writer, because of the fact that he created this massive world, universe, legendarium, languages, you name it, And
He
then
set the foundation, I suppose.
Exactly, and then stories came from it. I mean, far be it from me to disagree with George R. R. Martin, except in videos, but which I do quite regularly. But I think he's wrong in this one, because I think yes, Tolkien created this universe, but when he was writing, it does seem, as you say, more Gardnerish. He does allow the story to tell itself, and he allows his whole creation to move and change as he's going with it. And the way his entire kind of writer's conceit, the way he describes it, is as if he is in universe discovering new things, as if he's an academic finding these ancient papers about the elves or whatever the hobbits were up to. That's it. And when he changes his mind on something, it's almost like, oh, I found a new piece of paper here. I wonder what this one says. Oh, it says that I've been spelling orc wrong all this time. That's the kind of feel that he has. And it is as if his muse takes him in a slightly different way. There are, I went to a Tolkien lecture a while ago where the person giving it, Dr. Demetra, someone or other, I've forgotten her name, University of Glasgow, fantastic lecture. And she'd been through a lot of his interviews that he gave that back in like the 60s and 70s with various papers and radio stations and the like. And she says on a few occasions he would be going off giving some random talk about a language, and then he would just suddenly say, and of course the past tense of such and such in Elvish is actually, I think I'm going to change that. And then he would literally get a piece of paper, and then he would scribble down a change to his own language mid-interview, and then carry on with it, which is
brilliant. That's incredible.
Astonishing.
That doesn't sound like the mind of an architect, I can tell you.
It does not sound like the mind of an architect. Actually, I don't think I've had a chance to say this. If you don't mind a complete digression, people, apologies. This is a massive digression. But at this same lecture, I heard a fantastic story about Tolkien and his last few days, which I think is worth sharing with a wider audience, because this is this was a story from his, I think today we would say PA, it was his secretary, the woman who went through all of his correspondence. And apparently they were friends, and they had this this friendship, working relationship as well, that went on for a very long time. And they did the same thing every week. She would go to his house with this huge pile of papers, and they would get straight into work. And then after work, they would maybe chat for a bit and just sort of hang out. But the last time that she saw him, his secretary, as normal, she didn't know it was going to be the last time she saw him. As normal, she turned up at his house with this pile of papers, and she starts doing what they normally do. She starts saying, okay, so the first letter we've got here is, and apparently he just like waved to her. He said, no, not this time. Just let's have a drink this time. Let's have a drink. And so they had a drink, and then he says, actually, let's go for a walk. Let's go for a walk. And so they got out and they went for a walk in Oxford. And it turned into quite a long walk, and she was starting to get a bit concerned because he was quite an old man at the time. But he said, no, I want to go on. And they ended up at the Botanical Gardens in Oxford. And he said, I just want to say hello to all of my favourite trees. And he walked around the Botanical Gardens, and he just they'd read the names of all the trees, and he'd reach out and he'd put his hand on each of his favourite trees. And then they'd end up at the river, and they went to the willow, and he put his hand on that, and he said, right, let's go home now. And then they walked home, and that was the last she saw of him. And I think that is such a beautiful little story, as that this is just the heart of who he was, that he just wanted to say goodbye to the trees.
That's
anyway.
well worth the digression.
Good.
Beautiful story.
It is. So a complete digression, and so apologies if you were here for Fellowship of the Ring, but I thought that was just a lovely story. I haven't had a chance to share that with anyone.
That's great. I love that.
Let's go to, actually, I think I've only got a couple more questions from my patrons. So
Just before, I'm sorry to
Yes.
interrupt. I just did see a cool answer here to the last question that we were talking about from, I think Rhoda Leader is the commenter here. It says, "Hey,
Okay.
Robert, I think that Tolkien had the idea for his sequel to The Hobbit, and the war changed his perspective on how to write The Lord of the Rings. Love your channel. Big squidges for Dan." I don't know about the
Dan is
last
my
part,
dog.
but
Dan is my dog. Just to be clear on
well,
that one.
big squidges for Dan. But yeah, I
Squidges
just
for
thought that was a
Dan.
really cool.
But yeah,
comment.
no, that's a really I like that. That's really good. There was something else in the chat. I was there's always good.
There was another good comment there. It said something like and subscribe to the Mellon Heads. Yeah, I thought that was interesting.
Is that what it said? Like and subscribe.
Very,
to the
very
Mellon Heads.
insightful.
Very insightful.
Well, as we're off on digressions, guys, if you've been liking what you've seen, we've got a little bit more of them, so this isn't an end point. But if you've been liking what you've seen, just go. There is a link literally down there to the Mellon Heads YouTube channel. It would be great. Let's just give them a boost in numbers. Let's push. I don't know what they're on at the moment, but let's give them a few extra numbers. So when they wake up tomorrow morning, and they go, "What?" So that would be fantastic.
That would be lovely.
Do go and check out their podcast and things like that as well. But as I say, the easy links there. If you're watching live, wherever your live chat is, then I'm sure someone will put a link to other stuff. But yeah, let's get them a little bit of a boost for being on here. As a thank you for staying up late as well.
Thank you.
I was going to get a question from so Catherine Furseth. You were asking about Tolkien's writing style, which I think we've talked about already. Then you said a second point was a thing I like about the first book is how insecurity, uncertainty, and doubts seem to characterize and motivate a lot of the actions for many of the characters. What does this tell us about how Tolkien portrays his characters? I don't know if one of you wants to sort of pick up on this. I mean, this is quite an insightful point, I think. We often think of Tolkien as being quite black and white about his characters. We have the good characters, we have the bad characters, and the good characters are always heroic and good, and bad characters are very terrible and evil. But a lot of the good characters have doubt as a central part of who they are, that we see, I mean, definitely in characters like Sam, but also in Frodo, Gandalf as well. A lot of the characters have doubt. Where do you think this means anything? Do you think this signifies anything? What do you think Tolkien's telling us about with that?
Well, yeah, the examples that you brought up there with Gandalf, for example, when he refuses the ring, it's probably the right thing to do, but he doubts that he will. He thinks that it could corrupt him, and Galadriel does the exact same thing as well. She kind of feels like I could be the most powerful queen, and I could use this thing for good, but she has doubt in her mind. Now, it is probably good doubt, but I think if Tolkien, if there is a running theme, he's probably just trying to show a representation of humanity through the characters that he's portraying on the page. I don't know, is there another like hidden meaning, but it's adding more characters, it's adding more of an arc to each character's storyline. I to be honest, I never picked up on this thing. It is a quite a clever spot, and that was actually one thing that myself and Johnny have talked about before with the character of Aragorn, how in the movies, Peter Jackson portrays him as a man who has more doubt in himself, and that's just a total Peter Jackson adaptation. It's kind of like a new arc that he has to overcome the Isildur bloodline rather than the
Elendil.
The Elendil bloodline, yeah. So it's kind of like he has to overcome the doubt of who he is, whereas in the books he's much more assured of himself. And I don't really remember many parts in any of the books where Aragorn is filled with doubt within
himself. There is one after Gandalf dies in Moria. There's a quote from Aragorn that he says, "We must now continue without hope." He basically
he's talking about himself.
Yeah, because we know Aragorn's name is actually Hope.
You must continue without me.
I'm off, you guys. So yeah, if anybody doesn't get that, Aragorn's name was Estelle when he was a young lad living in Rivendell, and Estelle was the name that Elrond gave him, which is basically means hope. And there's another cool moment later on when, again, I'm digressing, but when Aragorn visits his mother for the last time, she says to him, I'm trying to remember the quote. She says to him, "I've given hope to the Dunedain. I keep no hope for myself," or something like that. Or no, she says, "You give hope to the Dunedain. I keep no hope for myself." And one of those hopes is written with a capital H. And so she's basically saying she's given her son to the Dunedain, and that she keeps no actual hope for herself. So that's a cool thing. Again, just a little reference of Aragorn's name meaning hope in Lord of the Rings as well. But anyway, sorry for that digression. And to continue that digression, in Peter Jackson's movie, that line is given to when Elrond gives Aragorn the sword, when he gives him the shards of what the hell? I can't remember the name of the sword. Anduril, Flame of the West. When he gives him Anduril in the tent, they share that little passage of speech. One of them says the first part, and Aragorn replies with, "I keep no hope for myself," or something like that. So just something that was put into the movie as well, which I thought was cool. But it's an interesting. So that's a part where maybe Aragorn shows that maybe he is feeling like they have no hope as well. I would say that in terms of building a character, if you are a writer, you want to build good characters, and trying to have them be relatable characters where they show similar, things like hopes, fears, doubts. You want to have a fully fleshed out character like that. And I would say a character that definitely shows lots of doubts and fears is the character of Boromir, who I think over many, many years has been my favorite character from Lord of the Rings. And again, it's a character that I've just really loved. And maybe I can't really put my finger on if somebody says, "Why is he your favorite character?" I won't say, "Well, it's just because of this exact thing." There's many, many different things, but maybe
Sean Bean. Sorry.
But maybe the way that character is written and the way he's not just this absolute, infallible hero. Like he's not just completely perfect. He has these different he has these little blemishes in his character, I suppose. So I think maybe in terms of writing a character, it's good that they have these things, but I don't know. I don't know if I could go further into answering that question.
No, I mean, I think that was an excellent answer. I mean, I think there's probably only one thing I would add to that, which is Gandalf with his ring, Narya, which I just got the quote up here, which was when Círdan gave him the ring, he said, "Take this ring, master, for your labors will be heavy, but it will support you in the weariness that you have taken upon yourself. For this is the ring of fire, and with it you may rekindle hearts in a world that grows chill," which is a cool little turn of phrase to start with. But also, I always think that moment when Aragorn is there saying we have to now go on without hope, it's all the time that Gandalf is with them. This is a magical ring which has the magic to be kindling hearts, giving people hope. The moment Gandalf is gone, everyone is broken. The Hobbit, the whole Fellowship, you see it. All of them are just, we can't carry on. There's nothing left. We have no hope left. And it's like almost over the top. And it's because you suddenly see the absence of the power of this ring to bring hope to them. It's fantastic writing because Tolkien has got such a way of making magic a part of the story without it being big spells all the time. You actually see it by its absence.
Wow.
As much as anything else, which I think is wonderful. City Slacker in the chat just saying, I think the professor said in his letters that writing the chapter Shadow of the Past is when he realized it was a part of the Elf Legendarium, which is, of course, the second chapter of the book, so he didn't really get very far. But that's if that's true, and I have no reason to doubt that, thank you. That's really, really helpful. Sarah Awesome Source saying, I think that little preview of the song was a sign of great things to come for us subscribers as well. If you appreciated that, then the whole verse, just, well, buckle up, get your earplugs ready. Curse Ballerina saying, could you, this is for Locked 7IX, could you guys comment on the rabbit stew that Sam cooked? Do you think Faramir and his men took it with them, or was it left uneaten?
I hope so.
I've heard this on
go
the...
on, go. You
okay,
I won't give context. You clearly have thoughts.
Well, no, I can't remember where I saw it. I think it was on Twitter where some people were like, and what happened to the stew? Does anyone else think about the stew that they make? So in the film, they make the stew, you know, with the conies and all that. And then Frodo and Sam go away for a little bit and end up being captured. But in the book, they do eat the stew. They have a great time, and the stew is delicious, I believe. So, yeah, it's just a difference between one and the other. Am I correct?
Well, I'm waiting for Johnny now.
Sorry. No, I was just going to say that I don't know. Like when you watch the movie version as well, they look like Sam's pretty disgusted when he's making this stew, and I always think it looks delicious. I really want to have
Eowyn's stew, by the way. Yeah, I think that looks like a lovely. I don't know what it looks like. Seafood chowder.
The taste of her stew, I think, is the problem rather than the look.
I
genuinely can't remember in the books. I remember that the chapter was of herbs and stewed rabbit. Which makes it even more of a focus of the chapter, because it's like the first half of it is, and it's like in the movies, is just like this this big thing, catching rabbits, cooking them, Gollum going, I hate all of it. I mean, that is a big issue, and then suddenly they get caught, and then I think then the Oliphaunt comes by as well. It's just like the action moves on. I genuinely can't remember if they eat it, but if you say that they do, then I absolutely 100% believe that. So that's now my canon answer. They ate it and it was delicious.
Well, I think so. If someone in the chat has the book in front of them,
there are always cleverer people in the chat than there are on the stream. That's one thing I've discovered.
You know the way a lot of people talk about Tolkien. Or sorry, I can't get the word name Tolkien out of my head. Tarantino, when they say about Tarantino and some of his best writing dialogue was in the movie Pulp Fiction, the scene where John Travolta and Samuel L. Jackson are driving along in the car and they're speaking about the Royale with cheese. And it's like, I think that for me, that part of like that movie, or even in the book as well, I think in the for like as in terms of a movie dialogue, it really worked well in Pulp Fiction. I love that in that scene in the movie where they're just talking about like, oh, what about some chips, and what about mash, I don't know, all the dialogue that Sam has with Gollum. I think that's basically Peter Jackson's Tarantino moment there. But
it's very it's very relatable.
Yeah,
I suppose.
Yeah,
it is, and I think. It's very much the creating this. This is Sam creating his own little bit of home. This is what he's good at. He can cook. He can add some herbs. He's carried these herbs all the way from Hobbiton with him. I mean, this is him doing his thing, and then suddenly it's all Gollum hates it. Then they get captured, and then whoa, there's a massive Oliphaunt. That's the feel of the chapter, is that. This is Sam trying to create a little bit of home, but it just does not work because they're in such a completely alien environment.
Yeah.
Question, Martin S. saying, I think we're heading into the realms of the theoretical. Love a good theoretical question. Could a sufficiently potent evil being with the right knowledge, maybe a hypothetical corrupt Aure, forge a grand master ring? Surpassing Sauron's master ring and taking over all the other rings of power, including Sauron's. So, I mean, I think my take on this is yes. Tolkien famously, his magic system is not rigid. It's very fluid. It sort of flows in. In fact, to the extent that Galadriel doesn't really even understand what magic is. She just sort of says, "I think you would call this magic, but it's just a thing that I do." So if you got Sauron is like Maya class, which is angelic and powerful. But if we had, and you talked about Aure is a member of the Valar. He's even more powerful. Could he create something that is more powerful than the One Ring? I don't see why not, because Sauron will have learned all that he knew about creating and smithing from Aure. So yes, potentially, I think so. But guys, would you want to head into the theoretical with this one?
Well, he was a student of. Also, I would have always pronounced it Aule, but I think you probably know more about the pronunciation of. How do you pronounce it? Aule.
I'm not the pronunciation expert, but so the E with the two dots is something like so Aule. But it always sounds like I'm just like I've eaten something I don't want. So I just say Aule.
I always pronounce it in Brian, so it's better than my pronunciation anyway.
That's fair enough.
Sorry, Johnny, go on.
But I was going to say that Sauron was one of his understudies or students or whatever back in the early days. Was he not? So
he was.
As you said, I agree with you completely. I don't see any reason why a higher being like a Vala would not be able to create something even more powerful. And as we've said, someone like Aule or Aule, he surely knows more about smithing and crafting these types of artifacts than someone like Sauron. So yeah, it's a good question. I've never once thought about that before, but it's an interesting question. But my answer would be, yeah, I don't see why not.
Yeah, I would agree as well with that. But I think, if I'm not mistaken, the reason why the One Ring is so powerful is because, well, it's created by Sauron, who is a Maiar, and he ensnares. No, he puts his own will and power into the ring, and he's like putting in part of himself into the ring, and that's what makes it so powerful. So no one could just the elves could create like lesser rings, or they could create kind of half magical rings, but like the One Ring is so powerful because of Sauron. So if somebody in the tier system above Sauron is creating a ring, then hell yeah, but nobody else would want to. Sauron is pure evil, and he's creating this for evil reasons. And I don't think. And
you said it's not, as you're saying as well, it's not just, I'm going to create a ring as a side project and then just have it there. It's like you need to pour your spirit,
your
into
will and malice.
Yeah, in order to actually have it up to the required level, in order to dominate the other rings.
He basically Horcruxes himself, to use a Harry Potter term. He's pouring some of his own spirit into this ring, and yeah. Well, why would the Valar do that? They could, and my God, that would be horrendous to see. But
if Morgoth came back and he was just like, you know what, I like Sauron's idea, I'm going to do the same thing.
I'm going to make a crown rather than a ring.
Well, Morgoth, if you delve deep into the lore of this, there's Morgoth's ring is this is one of the books that we have. Christopher Tolkien sort of amassed from Tolkien's, his father J.R.R. Tolkien's writings, and Morgoth's ring, Morgoth being the original big baddie and being this Valar level big baddie, he also did this same kind of thing in pouring something of himself. Horcruxing, as you say. I didn't even know that was a verb, but let's go with it. He Horcruxed himself, but his ring was Middle Earth. His ring was the world, and that's why it sort of comes down to this: the idea that when you get the planet, the world itself isn't pure, cannot be pure. Evil will never truly go away, a new branch will spring up somewhere. When you get the new shadow, this is the sequel that Tolkien tried to write and gave up on, this new shadow. He talks about it as like a dark tree, a black tree that's just like you get rid of it, but it just reappears somewhere else. That's the kind of feel, because, and it's not just a randomly because that's just the nature of evil. This is because Morgoth, this Valar level baddie, he'd made the whole planet his ring, and he poured something of himself into it. So there's always going to be a bit of that evil lingering. So,
and also what you're saying is that leads to the elves who were of the world as well. They were like, their bodies came from Middle Earth basically, and so we know that their spirits were eternal, but their bodies, because they had come from the tarnished earth of what Morgoth had tainted, then that's why their bodies could not live on. And we know that they are immortal creatures, but also a lot of people don't know that on Middle Earth, the elves did age, like, extremely slowly. But if they had just stayed on Middle Earth, their bodies eventually, over many, many years, would just fade. And then their spirits would have to find their way back to Valen, or back to the halls of Mandos. So again, I think the reason for their bodies actually fading was for that same reason. You can correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah. So it's actually, I don't think I've got anything to add. Yes,
that's why the Celebrimbor looks so old in the Rings of Power TV series.
He's been aging for a long time. Don't get me started on that one.
He's been rolling around in the dirt.
There are many small things. The age of Celebrimbor is one that does not quite work for me. I'm looking forward to Celedan, who is the elf with the beard, because he is so old. He has got a beard. I hope we see him. We should see
Hopefully.
him. He was around.
The end credits of season 1, perhaps.
End credits of season 1. Well, or just like a little Easter egg at the end of it. That would be good, wouldn't it? So the elves, they do age. Celebrimbor should look the same-ish age, probably younger than Galadriel, but let's move aside. It adds a completely different dynamic if he looks like her seedy uncle. Let's leave it at that. Reflective rambling, picking up for Thethor, saying, what's your opinion about Glorfindel coming back to Middle-earth and showing up during the Fellowship? Good idea, consequences, possibilities, problems, etc. Well, as we're on the Rings of Power, I will start this one out by saying Glorfindel was clearly robbed by Peter Jackson. He should have had a role in the movies. I understood why he didn't, but Glorfindel is a fantastic character and he should have been there somewhere. Glorfindel did come back to Middle-earth in the Second Age, so fingers crossed, maybe there's a chance that he appears in the Rings of Power. I've heard not even a whisper that he does, but we'll see. But yes, he's there in the Third Age. He does appear in the Fellowship of the Ring. The appearance is really good, fantastic. He takes on the role that we have with Arwen, where she comes out and meets Aragorn and the hobbits, and then takes Frodo quickly over to Rivendell. But he does more than that, and the power and impressiveness of Glorfindel, I think, is best shown by the fact that he comes out before this. They know that the hobbits are sort of on the way somewhere. He heads out, and there's a bridge over a river halfway between Weathertop and Rivendell. There's a bridge over the river. He rides onto the bridge, and there were, I think, 3 Black Riders, and they all scattered before him. Didn't even have to fight them off. They went away. Came to the Witch King. The Witch King, hearing that Glorfindel was on that bridge, just did a massive detour, went all the way down, miles and miles out of his way, lost days, and then came up the other side of the river just so he did not have to face Glorfindel. That's how impressive a figure Glorfindel is, that the Witch King himself he almost gave up on the ring because he did not want to be facing Glorfindel. But the sort of the meta question here is, what's the... Yes, we all love Glorfindel because he's an amazing character, but why do you think Tolkien thought it was important? He could have had an Arwen equivalent just coming out and helping out. Why do you think he needed to have this astonishing angelic creature coming back just to sort of have a supporting role in the Fellowship of the Ring?
It's a really good question, but I don't have a really good answer, unfortunately, to back it up. I think I was going to mention some of the things that you just mentioned there about to just try and tell people of why they should recognize how impressive the character of Glorfindel, how impressive he is, and the fact that the Nazgul, who are famous for striking fear into the heart of people, that's their most powerful weapon, and he actually put fear into the heart of the Nazgul, which I don't know if any other character that Tolkien wrote about. I don't think Tolkien actually said that happened with any other character. So possibly
Elbreth.
Well, also, but that is a really, really unique quality, I suppose, from Glorfindel. But why was he chosen? I don't know. I'm hoping that you're going to give me some amazing insight into this. I feel like this whole live stream has just been me and Dave kind of going, well, here's an answer, and I think, but
somebody asked a question. Somebody asked a question. I'm like, that's a really good question, Robert. What is that? No,
one thing I will say is that the people in the chat, my patrons, are astonishingly clever, and I dare say good looking, though you can't tell from their avatars, but they come up with some amazing questions. In terms of this, it's an interesting one because I do wonder whether this is partly his bigger role is he comes out with this prophecy about the Witch King, not by the hand of a man shall you die, kind of that one that leads all the way to Éowyn at the very end, killing the Éowyn, and of course Merry killing the Witch King at the very end. This is I don't know. I like to think this is just Tolkien making the link with the Silmarillion. Glorfindel was also epically cool in the Silmarillion. We get Gondolin, this great hidden city. When that falls, he was the head of one of the houses of Gondolin, and he basically, when the ragtag group of survivors are making their way out down along this mountain pass. And then a Balrog suddenly appears out of nowhere. He's the guy who says, right, I've got the Balrog, you guys keep going. And he takes down the Balrog.
He protects the women and children.
The women and children escape and save. And he, very much like Gandalf, takes on the Balrog, and then they both fall down the cliffside and die. And so he kills the Balrog and dies in the process. And this is a legendary story among the elves, and so he basically gets fast-tracked to come back to Middle-earth. That was in the first age, and then he dies, comes back to Valinor, and then gets sent back to Middle-earth to help out because they think things are going to go bad again, which obviously they do. The fascinating thing is that he is, I wouldn't say underused, but he appears a few times, fights a few times, is impressive a few times, but he doesn't lead on much. I think this is just Tolkien making a link back to the Silmarillion. And I think this is him also showing that the Valar care, which is a thing that, as Tolkien content creators, a lot of people say, oh, you're always down on the Valar for abandoning Middle-earth. They do give that vibe, and Tolkien does literally say that they do that. But at the same time, they do send the Istari. They do help out. We get Ulmo, the only always good Valar, who does send dreams and visions and things like that. And that's tongue-in-cheek for anyone who cares about the other Valar. When I say Ulmo's the only always good Valar, but he's amazing. But Glorfindel is part of that process. This is another way that they are caring about the children of Ilúvatar and caring about Middle-earth. So that's my take on it anyway.
Yeah,
excellent.
It is just weird that he is underused and not, why doesn't he join the Fellowship of the Ring, or why doesn't he join any of the battles? Or It's just
Well, I mean,
interesting.
I think that not joining the Fellowship of the Ring is understandable if they've decided to go by stealth.
Okay.
If they want somebody who to the ring wraiths appears and basically anyone with magical powers as this great shiny being, that's how Frodo sees him. When you just see him from Frodo's perspective, he's almost blinded by the light of this magical being coming towards him, and that would be just like this big beacon beaming out. Nazgul, we're here. So I kind of get him not being part of the Fellowship. It's well, why didn't you send him down to try and help out at the Battle of Pelennor Fields or something like that? I mean, it's that's slightly more confused, but the war was across all of Middle Earth. We have to keep on reminding ourselves. And so actually, although we might not have heard of him doing things, perhaps he went and helped out with Lothlorien, which was attacked 3 times. That kind of thing. I mean, we didn't hear that Rivendell got attacked, but there's no reason to think that it wouldn't have been attacked.
Everywhere was getting attacked. It was
everywhere.
Glorfindel in mysterious ways.
Willow Button saying, asking, have I ever considered doing lore videos on Terry Pratchett's Ring World? I love Terry Pratchett, and maybe one day I will, but not right at the moment. I've got my.
They're currently doing a series, a Disney series on that. I think maybe it's not.
Is that any good?
Oh no, I mean, I think it's in pre-production. I don't know. I could be wrong.
There was one about a year ago that I'd not heard great things about. But
yes, I think there's another one being
one. Okay,
yeah,
it needs a good series made from it. Maybe if that comes out, maybe I will do it then. So my plate is currently full with Song of Ice and Fire. With the gazillion spin-offs we're going to have from that.
Just to shout out comments that was left here by TRIG Ireland or Trig Ireland. He says they did eat the stew and quote, from the pans sharing the old fork and spoon, end quote. Then Sam went to the stream to rinse his gear, looked up and saw the smoke from the fire. Faramir's men arrived soon after. So there, another person is saying that they did eat the stew. So we can rest easy. We can sleep.
Excellent. Well, good. The Sam stew was appreciated by all. This is good news. Thank you very much for that. I do like, as I say, there are always people who are more knowledgeable in the chat, which is very helpful. So that was Trig Ireland. Thank you very much for that. I've got one more question from a patron. Now is the chance, if you have got any other burning questions, and now is the chance or the best time to drop them into the chat. But this one I think you will like. Adam Clery saying, hello, Robert. What are your thoughts about the 10th member of the Fellowship, Bill the Pony? What impact might he have had if he was not sent back when the Fellowship reached Moria? This is your Bill the Pony appreciation moment. It's impossible to hate Bill the Pony. What do you make of his contribution? What could he have carried on?
The mines are no place for a pony.
The mines are no place for a pony. I was going to say he wouldn't have gotten further than the Balrog. I think they would have probably just gone, go on, Bill, you go talk to the Balrog, and he could have been used as bait, or he could have been used as a distraction. And like, even if he managed to escape past the Balrog, I think there's so many other places that he would have struggled to get by as well, like sailing or going down the Anduin River. That would be nigh impossible. And if you continue on with Frodo and Sam, like, there's the marshlands, no place for a pony. Could you imagine him trying to climb up the stairs to Shelob's lair as well? I just think that's I don't think that would be very possible. So we'd all love to see Bill the Pony last the journey, but I don't think so. I think you need 2 feet, if you ask me.
I mean, shout out to this guy here, but
oh yeah, there he is
in all his glory. But I have to agree with Dave. I think it was the right time for Bill to go home. I mean, he was never meant to go too much further than that, and he's just the goodest pony,
the goodest boy that ever were.
So yeah,
do we know what happened to Bill the Pony, or is there anything?
We do. He did make it back. He got to Bree. He was looked after by Barlam and Butterbur. I think he wasn't one of the ones. So the ones that Bill Fernie kind of released, the ones that they had originally, I think those were the ones that our old friend Tom Bombadil looked after and brought back, and they returned being wonderfully revitalized. But Bill the pony has got a wonderful little end to his story, which is when at the very end of this, when they're heading back into the Shire and they've reclaimed Bill. They go back into the Shire. Who do they come across but Bill Fernie himself? Boo Hiss, the evil owner, who had Bill the pony had previously, who'd left him emaciated. And when they're just trying to get into the Shire, Bill Fernie runs off, and he gets kicked by none other than Bill the pony. So Bill gets his little bit of revenge at the end. So his comeuppance for Bill Fernie. So there's I like to think that Tolkien just thought, what's the end of his character arc? It works for me. But it's a lovely little end piece. But he had a happy life. He somehow, I've no idea how he managed to make his way all the way back there, but somehow he managed it. But yeah, he had a happy life, and his dramatic character arc reached a happy thematic ending.
That's great.
Okay, let's just have a quick flick through the chat, see if there's any more. Kulnitsky saying, "Who is Tom Bombadil? Don't get me started." We've done that one already. What else have we got? Someone saying that the series of the Watch, the Terry Pratchett series, was not good, which was what I had heard. Mike S saying, I think I heard someone once say, it was either a theory or something Tolkien actually meant, but did the Great Eagles have some kind of representation with the US in the war? I've not heard that, but Tolkien was very clear that he
did not like allegory.
Yes, he cordially disliked it in all of its forms, or something along those lines. Whereas he openly admitted no writer can ever truly write and divorce themselves from their creation because it comes from them, but he tried as much as was possible not to make what he was writing allegorical. So although everyone, understandably, because it was I was saying it's a hugely traumatic event. It was more than a traumatic event, but in the years after that, then people were still trying to be working their way through it. And when a great work of art such as this comes out, people would have seen and looked into it to say, "What does this? Is this a reflection of that in some way?" He was very clear, no, it's not. It's not about the war. There's nothing here. So, whereas I think people may well have read into there. I think Tolkien would probably have been fine with that. He was very happy about applicability, as he called it, which was in the same way that with myths and the like, each generation they read into the story and they take the goodness from it. They take the things that apply to them in their lives, but he was not trying to make it rigidly about a particular thing. So I think he would have been happy for people to interpret it in different ways, but he didn't specifically write it to be interpreted in a specific way. Okay, I think with that I'll end the chat questions, but why don't you remind, thank you very much, I should say, guys. It's been fantastic having you both on.
Thank you.
Why don't you remind people where on the great wide internet they can find you?
Will I shoot again, John?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so you can find us on Twitter at Mellon_heads, and that's Mellon with 2 L's, as in the Elvish word for friend. Also, you can just check out on Facebook and Instagram. You could just type in the Mellon Heads. It should come up there. Also, we're new on YouTube, brand new, so you can go and check out our YouTube account. I think if you type in the Mellon Heads, it should come up there.
There's a few other channels that just have like people with melons for heads, and so
yeah, and not Elvish word for friend melons.
Yeah,
actual melons.
Melons.
Yeah, so if you could find us there, that'd be great as well. But if you find our Twitter account, we have all of our links to all of our socials there. But if you're looking for our podcast, which is on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, everything, it's called The Council of Elrond, and you should see our image of the doors of Doran. And
the doors of Doran. The
doors of Doran.
Getting very late.
It is getting very, very late. But yeah, the Council of Elrond on podcasts, and yeah, there you go.
Excellent. And
thank you again to you, Robert, for
yes as well.
This has been a lot of fun. This has been great.
Well, an absolute pleasure, and I'm sure everyone else has got as much from it as I have. I've just quickly flicked on while you were talking. Obviously, wasn't listening to you, but I was checking out your YouTube channel. They're currently on 191 subscribers. Guys, we can at the very least get them over 200. So if you have been for 2.5 hours listening to these erudite and lovely people speak, the least you can give back to them for their time, and it's quite late for them both. The least you can do is to go over and give them a quick subscribe. So please do that. There's a link to that down in the description there. As for this channel, next week, I don't think I've got one lined up for next week, but I think I will be doing a Song of Ice and Fire one. I may try and pick up on a few of those questions about what George R. R. Martin was saying. Check out on hopefully Monday my detailed video breakdown of what he was saying, because I think there's a lot in there. But then we'll be back about 3 weeks with another Lord of the Rings one. I will make you guys disappear for just one moment while I point at things. If you are watching this back a little bit later, appearing somewhere around here is going to be a link to other live streams that I've done. Appearing somewhere around here is going to be a link to my Patreon page. So if you wish to support this channel, that's the best way to do it. Thanks, guys. Thank you, chat. Thank you, moderators. You are the best moderators in the entire metaverse. Take care, everyone, and I will see you again next time. Bye now.